Bienvenidos a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar de San Mateo-Foster City. Tenemos un intérprete para los participantes que necesitan traducción al español. Para escuchar la junta en español, presione el icono del mundo en su pantalla. Muchas gracias.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. I'm calling the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. We will start with our flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving on to 2B, roll call. Trustee Brooks. Here. Trustee Chin.
Here.
Trustee Proctor. Here. Trustee Trin. Here. And I am also here. Moving on to 2C, approval of tonight's agenda.
President Watkins, I'd love to request to move item 3C, which is our foundation and committee reports, to later down in the agenda, following our LCAP discussion, which is on 6A, so after 6A.
Do you want to make?
I make a motion. Sorry, I'd like to make a motion to move item 3 to 3C. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda with a modification of moving item 3C to following 6A.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. Moving on to 2D, approval of meeting minutes from last week.
I'll make a motion to pass minutes from last week. Second.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks for the motion, Trustee Trin for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain because I was not present. So 4 ayes and 1 abstention.
There seems to be like an echo.
Slight echo.
Are you muted on your computer?
I'm muted.
Seems like there's a slight delay.
Okay, we're going to move on to public statements related to non-agenda topics. The San Mateo-Foster City School Board cannot act upon any matter that has not been included and publicly posted on the agenda except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. The board may refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. Please limit your statements to 3 minutes. Any in-person audience members that have a public statement? Joe, if we can check on Zoom, please.
Yes, give me one moment. Okay, good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand, and speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. Once time has expired, we will move to the next speaker. First speaker is Judith Alderman. Let me get my timer ready. Okay, Judith, please go ahead.
One moment. Excellent. Here I am. My name is Judith. I'm a parent of a student at George Hall Elementary School, and I'm also the garden volunteer. And I wanted to let you know that we had 4 elementary schools in San Mateo Foster City that their garden programs participated in the recent San Mateo County Fair, where we won numerous ribbons and awards. And here is one of our garden award-winning displays. I don't know if you can see it there. It looks like my filter is on, but we're very proud of our success at school gardening. And right now we have a group of school gardeners online, their parents, volunteers, and teachers who are trying to gather together to organize our resources for all of the elementary schools in San Mateo Foster City. So hopefully next year you'll hear back from us more. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the public comments we have at this time.
Great. Thank you so much for the work on the gardens. Really exciting. I know some of the board members were able to attend. Okay, we are moving on to public statements related to agenda items. Persons will be called on at the appropriate time. We are postponing foundation and committee reports. So we will move to 3C, SMETA, CSEA, and SMFCAA updates. See some folks online, so who wants to kick us off?
SMFCAA can go first, if that's okay.
Yep.
Hi, good evening, honorable board members, Superintendent Ochoa, cabinet members, and guests. We are here this evening to share on behalf of San Mateo-Foster City Administrators Association. I am Jane Jung. I am the assistant principal of Bowditch, and
I'm Diego Perez, coordinator of communications and community services for the school district.
so this year, the San Mateo-Foster City Administrators Association started the year off with an entirely new team of dedicated educators.
The SMFC Administrators Association began drafting bylaws for the organization and began communicating and collaborating with members through social events and a one-stop for administrators to get all information in a centralized location from the district departments.
This year, we also celebrated many milestones from our administrative team, such as having 4 AXA Administrators of the Year, Jeanette Ramirez of Fiesta Gardens, Amanda Driscoll of Baywood, and Susie Riley, Coordinator of Student Services. We also jointly celebrated the joys of other administrators in their personal life and also supported them in times of struggle.
In collaboration, we provided support and solicited feedback from our colleagues to strengthen their ability to accomplish tasks and meet their goals. We wanted our members to feel supported in their professional development to staff.
During the 2023-2024 school year, the SMFC Administrators Association is excited to double down all efforts with an emphasis on building strong partnerships. The recent Partners Luncheon provided a space for our administrators to meet existing partners. With these connections, we plan to provide our support through collaborative efforts to better serve our communities. This can come in the form of sharing information from partners to our community, volunteering, material collection, and co-hosting events.
We are excited and committed to the students and families in the San Mateo-Foster City School District and look forward to what next year has in store for all of us to live, lead, and learn with integrity and joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Do we have Kathy or Alicia on? Joe?
Checking.
Maybe not because it's break.
I do not see them.
Okay,
Attend
as they should be off. So, okay, perfect. Moving on to board announcements. Any board announcements?
I was just gonna make an announcement, Saturday, June 24th. There is a bike tour starting from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. of the city of San Mateo as part of their Complete Streets plan. It's going to start in Central Park at 11 a.m. and if anyone is interested in going, welcome to attend. There's more information on the city of San Mateo's website.
Great, thanks, Ken. Any other announcements? Nope. Moving on to superintendent report, Superintendent Ochoa.
Hi, everyone. My report, thank you. And the folks who typically call in and give reports, I think are probably landing at SFO pretty soon here. We're all at the California Labor Management Initiative Summer Institute. Just spent 3 days with 11 of our labor partners, members from SMFCAA, from SMETA, and from CSEA. And I really just want to give my appreciation to them for their partnership and their leadership. As a group, we went through and spent hours together, talking about the many good things we have in this district and how we can still make 23-24 a better school year. And we have some really great communications coming out to all of our members and to our community soon. We're gonna have a lot of really strong collaboration next year, and it's gonna trace back to the work that we put in this week together. And so just feeling really thankful to work in a district where we have labor partners like SMETA and CSCA and SMFCAA. And that's my report for this evening.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Oshawa. Moving on to tonight's proposed consent agenda. All of the items are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion, unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items be removed and discussed. Superintendent of staff and staff recommend approval of all consent items. Movement of any recommended consent item is appropriate at this time. Joe, can we check for any public comment, please?
Yes. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hands, and speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. Once time is expired, we will move to the next speaker. President Watkins, I do not see any public comment at this time.
Great. Okay. We need a motion for the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Trin for the motion, Trustee Chin for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right, we are moving on now to Mr. Gaffney, the budget.
All right, thanks everybody. Oh, I let it go.
I think if you just leave that off, they can hear you through.
Yeah. No. How's that? Better. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone. I'm going to share a little bit of information with you tonight on the budget. Thank you so much to Blanc and her team for putting together all the documentation we provided to you in the public, an executive summary. We provided you the SACS reports, inclusive of all the standards and criteria, as well as a set of slides, which we'll walk through in a few moments. There's a couple things in the budget documents we share with you. I just wanted to focus in on two before I go through the slide deck. On an annual basis, we have these variables, right, that affect the budget from a revenue and expenditure perspective. One of the things we called out in our executive summary, and we talked about in a previous board meeting too, was the actual increase in funding we're going to see in our general fund this year. And it's related to the LCFF calculator. And the LCFF calculator, we look at our enrollment, we look at our ADA, and we look at our property taxes. And the base funding and the supplemental funding, which later on David will talk about the LCAP, we take in consideration the state COLA percentage, and that's applied in the LCFF calculator. And then we look at our property taxes in relation to the calculation in the LCFF calculator to determine what kind of growth we're going to have as a district. So again, we call that in our narrative for you that the state COLA is 8.22%, but our property tax growth was 4.88%. So while other districts are seeing this growth of 8%, we as a district, as a basic aid/community funding district, our actual growth in our revenue in the general fund, we're seeing about 4.88%. And that was at the time we did the budget documents. I checked on the tax assessor's assessment roll tracker today, and it's actually up to 5.62%. So as you know, as we go through the budget on an annual basis throughout the year, we make these adjustments. This is a positive adjustment we'll make it first year. It's close to $1 million for us, adjustment positive for us. So we'll make those adjustments that impacts our ending fund balance as well as our multiple year plan. So again, just want to call out that there's a difference between the growth we're seeing as a basic aid district and other districts are seeing. We had this conversation with folks at the county and with vendors. We've seen we've seen increases from different vendors ranging from 15 to 30% increases, while we saw an increase in the 7% range as a district. And so as we look into next year too, we're having dialogues with different providers too that are asking for raises between 8 and 15% and greater. Reminding that as a district, we're seeing this growth of 4.88%. Now it's at 5%. So it's a continual discussion we'll have. We'll continue to keep you updated on what these changes are in the budget. And another thing we called out in our narrative for you too is looking at the growth in our contribution in 23 relative to 21-22. And later on this evening, Heather's going to talk to you too about some increases we've seen in special education costs. Some of those vendor costs we've seen increases from some of these providers up to 33%. We're hopeful that we won't continue to see that increase next year. But again, the contribution we have this year to cover expenditures associated with special ed grew from 26 million up to 33 million. And moving forward, we think that we're going to see that decrease because we're instituting change in the organization. We're putting resources in place and planning in place to manage those challenges a little more effectively and more cost effectively too. So our multi-year plan has built into it some reductions in expenditures associated with that different management and working with different organizations to manage that contribution. Just want to call that out too. It's a really significant increase in cost for us, and that does come from your general fund from the unrestricted side. So we built that into the budget. From a cycle perspective, we called out for you in the narrative as well that we are in the process of closing the books, and there are things built into our budget. Currently, there are positions, some positions that still didn't get filled, and so there's some reconciliation on salaries and benefits that continue to happen. And as recent as this morning, I was having a conversation with some of the special ed team regarding some items like purchase orders related to special education costs, which I don't think are going to materialize. And we'll see that as a positive increase to our general fund ending fund balance for the current year. And that will cascade into the subsequent year. So we'll bring it back to you in our first scenario report. So just want to cover some of those items we've already covered in the narrative for you too. Those are some significant items that as we plan, we're going to see some changes. We're going to work on those items moving forward. And again, we've spent some money, some one-time money. We spent some money in increasing resources and individuals in the current year, understanding that while making those investments, we're going to see reduction in costs in the out years, and we put some of that reduction in costs in the years. We also know the last thing too, really quickly, the narrative we captured for you too, that there are some one-time resources that are available to us, and there are resources like ELP, which afford the district the ability to revisit some expenditures. And when we revisit the utilization of those funds, we anticipate seeing an increase in our unrestricted funds because we'll be using some of the restricted funds to cover some of this. So all that being said, I expect that your ending fund balance from 22-23 is going to go up, which means your beginning fund balance for 23-24 is going to go up. And we know we also have some things like growth in our property tax base, which can result in some increases as well. Okay, so that's just kind of a preface to the slides I'm going to share with you too. And thanks again to Blanca for putting this together for us. Slides up here. Okay, 23-24 budget. Again, this is where at the budget cycle, we're going to adopt the budget. Our next change will be at first interim, we'll integrate some of those property tax changes. And some of those changes we're working on to align some of the resources against some of the funds that are available to us for some of the expenditures we're currently. Okay, we recap for you some of the adjustments in the June adopted budget from the governor. The cost of living adjustment increase is up to 8.22%. And we captured what our property tax growth was at 4.88 this time. Unemployment insurance, a positive change to us. There's some reductions in funding from what we were originally told we were going to receive. Arts, music, and instructional materials discretionary block grant, there's a decrease in that funding, one-time funding. Prop 28 education programs, we don't know the exact amount we're going to receive, but that's an item we will include in our budget moving forward. So that's a very positive change for our district and for our students. The Learn and Recovery Emergency Block Grant, there was an overall reduction in that from the governor too, so we're managing to that reduction. Again, a very positive item for us to be working with. And then again, on the last one here is the ongoing expanded learning opportunities funding. This is going to be an ongoing source of funding for us. And in addition to that, there was an extension for the 21-22 allocation that we'll be able to spend at the end of June of 24. And initially what's conveyed was that they had to be spent by the end of this fiscal year. So that gives us some additional time to plan. We'll work on that plan with several folks and looking forward to sharing that plan with you at some time in the near future. Okay, so that's a recap of the governor's budget and items in the governor's budget. These are a couple of slides that share with you some of our major assumptions which we built into the budget. Again, this starts with a COLA, 8.22% that's applied to the LCF calculator. We look at our enrollment and our ADA trends. Again, we'll see what happens to our ADA moving forward. Again, post-pandemic, we saw a decline in our ADA. Historically, we're in the 95-96% range. We were down in the 93% range in the current year. We've incorporated some of the reductions of FTEs, which we spoke about previously, into our budget. From a certificate perspective, this shows your property tax growth percentage of 4.8%. And again, plus kept your interest at 1%, lottery unrestricted, mandated block grant. And then we've got some items here like parcel tax, our annual adjustments for that, utility cost increases, our transfer to deferred maintenance, or change to maintenance, health and welfare rate. I just saw today, which is announced CalPERS average is like 6.8% as opposed to 5%, but our budget we have 5%, so I have to make that adjustment to unemployment, and in our STRS and PERS contributions and our indirect cost rate. Okay, so that's some of the major components we built into the budget. We did build into our budget some savings we anticipate from the installation of our solar program, our solar structure is related to the bond, so that's really positive. I will include in the budget. Okay, this shows you again your general fund budget at a glance of both your unrestricted and restricted funds, our total revenues and total expenditures, and your beginning fund balance for 23-24, and what your ending fund balance is. Okay, and looks at both the restricted and unrestricted side. We are spending down some of our reserves. We accumulated. As an example, we have some funds from Measure B that have been accumulated over time. And as you know, we're moving forward with a stipend to our staff related to that. So there's a spend down of items like Measure B from the restricted side of funds. Okay. And again, here's general fund revenues at a high level. This shows you revenues broken down unrestricted and restricted for a total of $188 million. This is the contribution I was speaking about earlier too. We've seen that increase between 21-22 and 22-23. But 23-24, we don't show a huge increase in that between the current year and next year. Okay, 23-24 general fund expenditures. This breaks down for you salaries, benefits, books and supplies, etc. What our total expenditures are for the year, $212 million for the general fund. And again, we're spending down some one-time resources. The fact we're deficit spending in and of itself is not a bad thing. If you have a reserve, if you have some one-time money in a reserve and you spend that down, the only way you spend it down is by deficit spending. Okay, so this shows you our multiple year projections, and again, over a multiple year period of time, when you look at the unrestricted side of the budget in year 3, we show that we are not deficit spending in year 3 on the unrestricted side. Again, we're spending down some one-time dollars. We're managing our contribution. We're making some changes to programs and staffing and resources with the understanding and anticipation we're going to see some reductions in savings for the district moving forward. Okay, so this is your snapshot of multi-year projections. Again, showing that you are going to be able to incur all of your expenditures, associated commitments, your salary increases, step and column, and all those things are factored in. And this is I would tell you too, we budgeted very, very conservatively too. Not all of these expenditures, they may not all materialize, but this again is a very conservative budget, assuming that all positions will be filled, and will incur the expenses for all those positions, et cetera. Okay. All right, and again, this is a components of your in fund balance, estimated 22-23. Again, for 23-24, this corresponds with the document, which is you had the public had seen earlier too. Okay, this is just the breakdown. You have your 6% reserve essentially, and you got some additional dollars set aside in your budget in 23-24. And again, I expect this dollar amount is going to go up, associated with us closing the books for 22-23, and also shifting some expenditures over to some of our restricted resources, which are permissive, which can make this value go up overall for the district. And we're in the process of making those adjustments too. Okay. Again, this is a snapshot for you of the other funds: child development, cafeteria, deferred maintenance, your building fund, your development fees fund. There's very few dollars in this county school facilities fund. Your special reserve for capital projects. The other enterprise, Fund 63, this looks a little unusual to you too because it shows a beginning balance in the negative. Really quickly, this is an accounting adjustment that's made associated with your other post-employment benefits. For an enterprise fund, that liability is shown as a whole amount as opposed to your OPEB liability you have for other post-employment benefits for the general fund is accounted for and held in Fund 71. But for an enterprise fund, and for Maggie and Matisse, an enterprise fund is a fund that the district can have in place that actually generates revenue. Things like cafeteria funds or other funds that districts permissive for districts to generate revenue, transportation and things like that. This is our annex program of our child development funds, which is an accounting exercise for your post-employment benefits. It's been reported in a different way for several years in the district, but there's a change in GASB that says it has to be reported in this manner. So you still have cash in this account, you still are going to be able to address all of your expenditures, but this is reflecting the post-employment benefits liability in a different manner than it has been done historically. Okay. So that's kind of a quick snapshot for you of the budget. Again, it's ever-changing variables, some unforeseen circumstances which we manage. And again, we're in the cycle right now of adopting the budget and ensuring you have funds to address all your needs, all your commitments for the current year and the next 2 fiscal years. And our next official document we'll bring to you is the first interim, and we'll incorporate some of the changes we talked about today. So that's a quick snapshot for the budget.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. We will turn it over to the board for clarifying questions.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I had 2 questions. The first one being about the ending fund balance. In the past, we've always had this 1-month payroll set aside there, and I see that it's not going forward. So could you explain a little bit of the justification for that?
So again, there's numerous factors that are associated with Allison. Some of that is related to the contribution. We're seeing this increase in our contribution from the current year. That's going to be recurring moving forward. We also take a very conservative approach to how we budget for salaries and benefits for assuming that all positions will be filled and will incur those expenses. We also are reconciling between open positions we have and contracted services for special ed as an example. The way that budgeting is done is that there are positions that are created. We have had some redundancy in the past and a little bit of redundancy in this too, because we have an amount for the contracted services for some of these non-public agency providers, as well as some positions that are in the system. So there's some of that reconciliation which will still happen, and with those adjustments, that amount will go up, and some of that 13 will come back. So those are some of the key items: the contribution, the positions, and again, some of the flexibility we have to realign some of the expenditures against restricted resources as opposed to unrestricted resources will make some of that dollar amount go up too. But again, this year we saw that contribution go up close to $7 million. And And in addition to, we had salary increases in 7 colleagues, utility increases. We had increases in property liability. We had increases in our utilities expenditures this year too. So that all contributed to it in terms of how that amount is depleted. So that's kind of a big picture summary for y'all. So, and Blanca, if there's any Blanca's to add, I forgot to mention, I welcome Blanca's comments too. Blanca, anything you want to add to that? Unmute.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. No, that pretty much wraps it all. Yeah, we've had a few increases in our utilities. We also did a one-time, textbook adoption. That was part of our LCAP supplemental funding, but that also, which was also part of our reserves. So all of that kind of amounted to all those expenditures.
My second question, which maybe you slightly answered it in the first question, but I understand deficit spending when we have reserves, but almost $30 million over the next 2 years seems like a lot to me. So is there any like big ticket item that you can like call out as to why we're gonna have a loss of 24 million this next year and 5 million next year?
One of the things I mentioned too, Allison, was the parcel tax. So we had, that's about $7 million.
Yeah.
Salaries, so that's a big ticket item. Again, the contribution for special education, the increased costs for MPAs and MPSs in the $4 or $5 million range is a significant component of that too. We could go through and give you a breakdown in more detail, but that's just how I had some big ticket items. We had some legal expenditures, we had some utilities expenditures, we had some, as Blanca was mentioning too, textbook adoption, and so that's how I'm trying to hit some bigger ticket items.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry. You mentioned the personal tax measure B. I know that on our website it's listed as expiring in 2028. I'm wondering, does that affect the 27-28 fiscal year, or how does that, like, I'm wondering when it starts, showing up in our multi-year projections.
I have to write them down. I'm going to go through it. Ken, I think 27, 28 at the end of 28. So if you go back to the year it was passed,
2019, yeah.
2019, right? And so 1920 was your first year, right? So 1920, 21, 22, 23.
It's okay. I just wasn't sure whether it was going to be in next year's budget in 27.
27, 28 is last year.
Okay. Okay. So after next year, that's when we start seeing it in our multi-year projection.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any other board clarifying questions? Great, we will open up for any audience public comment. Okay, Joe, if we can open up to the Zoom audience, please.
Certainly. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand. Speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks, and once time has expired, we will move to the next speaker. Wait another moment. President Watkins, I don't see any public comment at this time.
Okay, thanks. Opening it up for further board discussion. No other comments or discussions. It is up for a vote.
I would like to make comments. To put it on the record. To me, I'm just like a little bit shocked to see the large deficit for this year. And so I just want to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible. And I do appreciate that 2 years out, we start to see we're back in like, not in the red and in black. But I think one thing that concerns me is that we have a large deficit scheduled for next year, and we don't have that 1 month of payroll in the ending fund balance. So to me, it's like you could almost add them together, and unless I'm misunderstanding like the math here, but it seems to me that you could almost add them together. And that's how much we're actually going down, right? We're like having a loss in operations, plus we have a lower set aside in the ending fund balance. So it's okay because I trust the numbers and I trust that we have the proper assumptions, but it is to me, it's a little shocking to see that large of a number in 1 year alone. And then to add 2 years and it's 30 over 2 years, just a little alarming. So just want to make sure that we're being super fiscally responsible. I know that you are very conservative in the budgets, and I know we're going to get an update soon, but I'm hoping it's going to go like up rather than down in future.
I'll follow, and I know Patrick, I know you guys definitely sharpen the pencils and are pretty conservative. I remember in that, funding and balance, sorry. In the projections we've seen in multiple years, like $7, $5, $6 million or so. The 24 does stand out, and I'm glad you went over some of the things. I think it would be nice, like as a follow-up, maybe in the next presentation, to get clarity on what was actually in the 24 million. I know you rattled off, teachers and also the special education, but it'd be great to see that because we've seen numbers, but it's never been 24. So, but I know you guys are working on the numbers, and I think it would be helpful. But yeah. No, that makes sense.
I guess one thing I'm also noticing is that for example, in the revenue column, our LCFF sources, like that revenue number. In fact, I mean, some of the revenue numbers are like kind of flat, and that one is a little more down compared to the projections for the following 2 years. I think that is also part of it, is that like the revenues are also lower as a total. And if you have anything to add to that. Sorry, looking at page 10 of the multi-year projections.
Are you looking at both? Is that what you're
I'm sorry, the page 10 of the
Oh, I'm sorry.
unaudited actuals.
Not the slides. Yes.
I'm looking at the. Oh wait, am I?
Then you're looking at slides.
Yeah, sorry, the slides.
Look at the slides. Okay.
Yeah, page slide 10.
So on the slides, I'm showing again, Maggie, the LCFF sources are going up over those 3 years.
Right. I guess I'm just saying, like, in the first year, it's lower, and that's contributing to the deficit because it's it's lower than the other years. Are you able to say any more about like why the number is going up over time? Like what causes the increase in the LCFF?
Sure. So
sources?
the LCFF, again, what's going up over time in the assumptions, Meg, is that the growth in the LCFF is, it's really twofold, but it's primarily our property tax growth. We have a conservative property tax growth estimate about, I think, 3.33 for 24-25 and 3% in 25-26.
Okay.
The current year we have 4.88. It's actually closer to 5. It's 5.6 as of 20. So we'll make that adjustment. We've historically seen in our district 6% or greater. But this is showing growth in the LCFF sources in those out years, so 3.33 and 3%.
Okay, so that number you think will be, like in the update, will be larger?
Yeah, I know. So yeah, so 23, 24 will be increased by $1 million, and that'll be, each one of those years will go up by $1 million. And then in those out years, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 24, 25, and 25, 26, if we're in the 5% or 6% range. Roughly every percent increases in $1 million increase in funding.
All right.
I can download that for you.
I'm sorry, I just, the 24.255, you talked about how, when you look at the ending fund balance, one thing that you said was something about the teacher salaries. Are you referring to the Measure B money that we had a reserve, and then so before that wasn't sort of programmed in the budget, and now all of a sudden it is, and that's what we're spending down, and that's why the number's showing. Okay, okay, thank you. I get it, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the budget.
Thank you, Trustee Chin for the motion, Trustee Brooks for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Patrick. Moving on to 6A, approval of the LCAP.
Yes, good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Ochoa, David Chambliss, Assistant Sup for Ed Services, here to present to you for approval the 2023-2024 LCAP. I'm going to take a few minutes and just hit some highlights for you, and then turn it back over to you for any questions. So let me just present my screen. All right, can you see that all right? Okay, so just following the budget discussion that you just had, I just want to note a couple of budget items that as a district you can see reflected in the table here. The plan for next year is to have expenditures roughly around 213 million. In this LCAP, which is meant to be the place where we, in alignment with our strategic plan, describe the actions that we're going to take to dramatically improve services and supports to students. You'll note that we have described here about $30 million worth of funding. I should add that one of the key pieces of the LCAP is the idea that we are required by EDCO to spend a certain percentage of our LCFF funds on increasing or improving services to students who are described as unduplicated students, which means these are students who are foster youth, those who have compromised housing, English learners, as well as students who come from families that are economically struggling. We, in this year's LCAP and with the funding calculations that we made, are required to spend approximately $9 million. And we actually are spending a little over $10 million. So the important thing here is just that commitment to accelerating and improving the supports to our students and bringing the funding to do that. The plan itself, you've had a chance to look through it over the last couple of weeks. Let me just make a couple of points about it. The key first part of it is where we're analyzing and reflecting on this past year's work, both its successes and identified needs. I do want to acknowledge that the work that we've done in doing that reflection and getting feedback from our educational partners, of course, our families, our DLAC, we have very active and strong engagement with SMETA, or our certificated staff group who've spent a lot of hours and time giving us feedback. And that only makes this plan stronger and more representative of what our community is about. You will recall from the strategic plan that there are 3 major goals driving that plan. We have the same goals in our LCAP. This first goal 1 is focused on academic achievement, and it's where we lay out all the actions that we're taking in support of improving teaching and learning and secondary interventions, that kind of thing. The second goal is focused on equity. And again, this is where we talk about our work to support students around culturally responsive curriculum, LGBTQ plus students, as well as special education students. And the third goal is focused on wellness, which is, of course, where we talk about the strategies we're putting in place to reduce chronic absenteeism, to build positive and safe climates, and otherwise, support the social emotional health of our students. Finally, there are a set of tables that outline the expenditures. You've had a chance again to look at them. I just would point out again, this table here is the contributing actions table. This again is where we highlight those actions that are specifically supporting our unduplicated students and where we're required to spend about 8.73% of our budget in increasing or improving services. We are in fact spending 9.44%, which is an increase of about $1 million over what is mandated by Ed Code. So let me pause there, and I will invite you to pose any questions and look forward to your approval. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. Opening it up to the board for clarifying questions. We'll open it up to in-person audience for any public comment. Joe, if we could open up Zoom public comment, please.
Yes. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand, and speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. Once time is expired, we will move to the next speaker. President Watkins, there is no public comment at this time.
Great, thank you. Opening it up for board discussion. This item is also up for a vote.
I'll start. I always, nice to meet you. Thank you, David, and your team for all your hard work. I know that putting together the LCAP is a all year round process in some ways. There's definitely certain highlights that stick out to me. It's almost like a summary of the year before and where we're going to the future. But one thing that I did want to point out, which I thought was really great, was our reclassification rate jumped up 13%. And I think that's fantastic. And I know that goes to a lot of the hard work. Well, everyone's hard work on everything, but that's one highlight I wanted to point out that I thought was really good that's highlighted there. And so I just want to thank you guys for all your hard work on this.
Yeah, I'll echo Ken's comments. I do continue to be concerned about, these key groups of students that are we haven't accelerated yet. I know that, obviously, like, we want to see as much growth as possible there. And I also want to, think about some of the ways that maybe we can focus more on these students. I see, for example, on page 10 that there are some pretty, the chronic absence rate is pretty high for some of these groups of students, which I'm sure is contributing to that. And so, maybe it, targeting some of the resources towards making sure that at the very least students are getting to school. I know that, we're considering some changes in terms of transportation, like, what are, just thinking through, like, what are some of the levers that we can pull so that we don't, we don't have students that are, sort of, I don't want to say falling through the cracks, but, that these students get extra support. Because I do think it's important that they actually be on campus. The more that they are not on campus, they're feeling disconnected from the school community. They're feeling disconnected from the teachers and administration and their classmates. And so it's all kind of, related, right? Like to some concerns that we have heard about behavior and that sort of thing. So just want to highlight that.
Thanks for the update. I think, I appreciate, of course, echoing what other folks have said about just all the time that goes into the LCAP. We know it's exceptionally time intensive. But I think one of the things that just I'm reflecting on as you were sharing a little bit, David, is just how, I think about like kind of the recap that we've done around the strategic plan and how just really everything is exceptionally focused and framed under those kind of three big buckets, and the work that we're doing and the data we're collecting and the money that we're spending, right? It's like it's strategic really for the first time since I feel like I've been on the board. And I think it's really helpful as a way for us just to frame the work and everyone knows kind of what we're moving towards. And so I just really appreciate that. And I feel like it's like very much sinking in a way that I think is just exceptionally productive. And while we're, I think that there are lots of places where we're seeing like a lot of great progress, and there are obviously places where we need to continue to focus. I think one of the other things that I'm reflecting on is looking at some of the desired outcomes, and some of our goals are like really ambitious. And I remember years ago, like having conversations about like the goals that we were setting and how we were selecting targets and are they ambitious enough? And so I, as I'm like looking across in 3 years, like there's some really ambitious goals in terms of what we want to do. And I guess one of the reflections I have thinking about kind of bringing all of those pieces together is just in a, I guess, systematic and like easy to understand way. Is there a way for us to do some sort of annual reflection that's public facing around, that isn't like in like a 130-page document, but that's around like, we have these goals, this is what we've done, this is what it costs, this is what worked, and this is how we know, and this is what didn't work and what we're not doing. Like I'm also thinking about the budget conversation we just had, like if there are things that we know are not working, and I know that this is happening in the background, I don't always know that it's like front and center in terms of like the conversations that we're having, or even like what folks just, parents and community members know. Like I know that we're being really strategic, or you all are being really strategic about the things that we're doing and why we're doing them and monitoring the progress. And so like, how can we bring a little bit more transparency around the things that we're like, oh, we're doubling down here because this is the growth we're seeing, and we're like pivoting here because we're not seeing the kind of growth that we want. And so I just, yeah, that's just like one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, we're pulling kind of all of these pieces together around like the money that we're spending, the direction that we're going, the goals that we have. And then there's this piece around like what's working and what's not working, and how do we just communicate that. But yeah, I appreciate this and just again, like the really strategic way that we're kind of moving forward as a district, I think just allows, will allow for us to make the kinds of gains and growth that that we've been talking about for a long time and are actually starting to see in actuality now. So just really appreciate all the work that's happening across the board there.
I would like to make a final comment that I would like to thank you for preparing this report and identifying the comprehensive strategies that are going forward. I still have some, I guess, clarification that I would like to see in the middle school area that is more clear about the comprehensive support and services and improvement all around that we are focusing on in our middle schools. I see a lot in our elementary areas that I think are amazing, but again, focusing on our middle schools are, I think, something that we need to be able to clearly identify the strategies that we plan on implementing and identifying how we're gonna, I guess, support our middle schoolers in a way where we can see that they are getting the supports that they need.
Any other board comments? Otherwise, a reminder, this item is up for a vote.
I'll make a motion to approve the LCAP.
I will second. Thank you, Trustee Chin for the motion, Trustee Proctor for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. We will loop back now to 3C, Foundation and Committee reports. Over to you all.
I'm just gonna. Should we go with you or not?
I know, it's
Sure.
Yeah.
Come on up.
How many of us do you want?
Everybody.
Everybody, of course.
I'm just gonna read a little statement and then we'll put them.
We're a team.
Okay.
Yes.
We're a team. We're a team. Yeah, watch out for that flag.
Good evening, I'm Sonia Toppin and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the San Mateo-Foster City Education Foundation. We believe every child deserves the best education possible and we need each of you to make it the best possible. I have the honor of presenting the check from the San Mateo-Foster City Education Foundation to the San Mateo-Foster City School District. But first, I want to take a moment and pause to thank everyone that makes this check possible. Each dollar means so much, and it says so much. We want to thank every child that reads and logs their minutes, because every person who donated to the readathon made this possible. Together, the students read over 1 million minutes and raised over $126,000. Each person who reads to their child or listens to the child read is a real hero. I still can't believe Annie Barros, who is from the famed author of the Ivy and Beach series, was a featured author this year. We want to thank everyone who purchased Warriors and Giants tickets through our websites. Please continue to do so as it supports athletics in our schools and allows our students to see teamwork in action. We want to thank all of our athletes, musicians, artists who participate in our programs, and the educators that teach them to do their personal best. We want to thank everyone who attends our schools and donated to the Night at the Museum virtual gala. I'm sure the students are still talking about the amazing high five tunnel experience with the Warriors game. Lastly, I want to give a special thanks to our student board member, Zach Thorpe, who has raised personally over $15,000 and so much awareness to our schools and the environmental impact via the Got Sneakers campaign. Thank you, Zach, and his wonderful family and friends who supported his efforts. Thank you to the many community members who donated their shoes and monies to the campaign. We want to thank all of you, our partner sponsors, who allow the students to dream big and their generous grants and donations. Gilead, San Mateo County Measure K Funds, Woodlawn Foundation, City Arts of San Mateo, City of Foster City, City of San Mateo, First Republic Bank, Cal Water, Camp Galileo, Chance to Excel, and our San Mateo Foster City libraries. We cannot provide excellent schools without their support. We want to thank everyone who donated to our annual campaign at any level. Every dollar raised goes to our students. Every dollar counts. Please give generously, as I think, I can't think of a better way for a dollar to be invested than in the education of a young child. Last but not least, I want to thank everyone for sending their kids to the San Mateo Foster City School District, because I believe they make our schools amazing. Let's see, it's okay. Giving to the Ed Foundation at any level sends the message that we care about our schools. Schools are free, but great schools need community involvement. Thank you, and I look forward to you joining us soon. Please share your gifts and volunteer, because you make us great. Now for the check. The past 3 years together, we have raised over $2.7 million for the school district. And now we have the pleasure to present the check for $533,310 this year. Yeah, where do you bring you? So we would love to take a picture with you.
Yeah.
Honor and officially hand it over. Big signs always awesome. Yeah.
Sharp should probably be holding the other end.
Yeah, Sharp in there.
Yes. You are the president.
Oh, we're going to.
Oh, we were here, sorry.
You want that way? Oh, wait, you want the angle? Oh, angle. Okay.
I gotta go to styles.
I know, right?
Right.
3, 2, 1. Congratulations, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna stand for the duration because these are my keys. I almost forgot that there might be other foundation. Other foundation committee reports.
I'll just mention that President Watkins and I met with Councilman Newsom in our San Mateo Liaison Committee yesterday, 2 days ago. I forget. Where we talked about various things, including Councilman Newsom wanted us to mention and publicize the bike tour on Saturday, and also mentioned that they will be installing the speed limit signs. They are, for those who don't know, they are changing the city. We'll be changing the speed limit around our schools, the city of San Mateo schools, from 25 miles per hour down to 15 to promote additional safety. And so they plan to have it all up and running by the beginning of this coming school year, and which is great. And they do plan to do some sort of education and enforcement campaign. So it's a great win for our community to protect our schools. So I just want to mention that.
Any other foundation or committee reports? Yes. We will move on to 7A, special education update.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Ochoa. I'm Heather Morgan, and I am here with the special education update for the end of the year. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a moment to pull up my slides. There they are. And sorry. Okay. Nope, sorry. I'm going the wrong way here. There we go. All right, I hope everyone can see this all right. So tonight we will be looking into data, program, fiscal, and staffing updates and implications, as well as our CDAC report. So this slide here takes you to our current year of program locations. And if you recall, one of our main goals in the department over the past 2 years has been to more equitably spread out programs in each complex so that students that live in any complex, regardless of what their disability is, may have access to that same spectrum of support. So this is what we have this year. This is our finishing up with 22-23. And the next slide shows what our plans are for next year. And you'll see some shifts here. We have added the 2 therapeutic classrooms. Both are going to be in Foster City, one at Brewer and one at Bowditch. We've also added a K2 mild mod in Highlands for the first time in a real long time, which I'm very excited about bringing that class to Highlands Elementary School. And then George Hall historically had a very different band of division. So they had 3 special day classes with 2 grade level bands. And instead now we'll have 2 classes with 3, which is more of the industry standard, a little bit more typical across the state. And also it helps quite a bit with mainstreaming and inclusion. So that is a shift that you'll see there. We also are moving one of the mod severe classes from Abbott to Burrell. Move this down a bit here. And as I mentioned, the 2 therapeutic classes, which are additional classrooms. So those are new. Okay, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the professional development that we have in place. Some of this has already started with our summer training, and some of it will be going into the 23-24 school year. So you can see we have developed professional development for all of the categories within our department, from behavior techs and occupational therapists to RSP and SDC teachers, and then more specifically for their age groups that they cover and or specific areas like compliance or some of the tools that they use throughout the year. Goalbook assists with writing goals. SACE is our information system for special education, and Wyatt is a test that we use when we're assessing students. And let's see, also our inclusion kickoff and mindset shift already started. It was really successful last week. We had the first band of that happen, and we are going to continue that with a second set of those in August, and then ongoing inclusion site work throughout the year with the focus school, sorry. And I'll be talking more about inclusion in my second presentation tonight. And then also our international hires will be getting IEP basics, compliance, SACE, and expert Q&A over the summer before they get started. Okay, and here we go. Wanted to update you on the number of initials because we talked about this last year and we had, you can see there's an increase in the number of initials, but what was concerning last year, more than the number of initials, was the number of DNQs. And that's basically a DNQ means does not qualify. And when we have high numbers of DNQs, that is a sign that we are assessing students unnecessarily and perhaps not utilizing our MTSS and other interventions. So I wanted you to have this data because we did, although the initials are up, the DNQs are down. So in 21-22, 33% of our assessments did not qualify. So that's an enormous amount of bandwidth and effort and time and resources that go into assessing students who end up not qualifying. We will reduce that this year to 14%. Which I think is a big win, and it shows that we are moving in the right direction. Now, I do understand that 340 is a lot, but I want to just bring to your attention that that includes our preschool and private school assessments. Preschool, we were backlogged for a few years, actually, with many, many assessments that were not being completed on time. And this is the first year that we are very, very close to being caught up. And so because of that, it's more assessments. So our preschool assessment team just were like workhorses this year and amazing in the ability to complete those assessments and get them finished so that students can get the help they need in a timely manner. And in best case scenario, when they're still very small, so that we can give them their interventions that they need before they get to being in school age. Oh, and then also private school assessments. Just a reminder that we are responsible for students who live in the San Mateo-Foster City neighborhoods, even if they don't attend public schools. If their parents have placed them privately, we are still responsible for assessing them. Likewise, we can be responsible. It's a little tricky, but we can be responsible for students who don't live in our area but attend private schools in our area. So we do have a large amount of responsibility for the private school sector. Okay, and I wanted to also just remind you about some of our preliminary assessments, internal assessments. We look forward to the spring 23 CASP data. We're hoping to see the similarities between that and our internal assessments throughout the year. This year, things were looking really good within math, and we anticipate that there will be some parallel activity when we look at the CASP of 2023. And this is our, in terms of fiscal updates and implications, I really appreciated Patrick going into some of our costs and what we've been seeing in terms of the NPS and MPAs. As we know, those are two areas that are very costly for us. We have reduced for next year from 38 to 31 students attending non-public schools. As you know, this is a case-by-case scenario. We place students as is appropriate. However, it is also something that we're hoping to decrease with the creation of those therapeutic classrooms, because we can now offer those services within our own schools and by our own teachers, and we do not have to outsource as many students. We continue to have seats there, and we will continue to suggest our own therapeutic programs as it becomes appropriate and as students' IEPs come up. So you should see a continued trend towards us being able to bring these students back to our own district. Okay, and another thing, connecting back to the financial report today, one of the things that we really need to do is be proactive and not just reactive in the way that we look at our increases in MPAs. And so in this spring, the superintendent's office and student, and special education did a staffing review to examine how accurate our staffing for students with one-to-one support in their IEPs were. And as a result of that, we are making some changes for next year in order to tighten it up and also to make sure that we are not wasting resources. So all SDC classrooms, just as a basic support, will have 2 designated classroom paras, and RSP teachers will have 1. However, it's important to note that in rooms with concentrated adult support, staffing will be analyzed and reduced appropriately. So, for example, we do have a couple of our more mod severe classes where every student in the class has a para, a one-to-one. It isn't necessary for us to staff those classrooms with additional teacher aid support. So we are going through and reducing those. So even though the standard would be 2, we may not be putting 2 in a classroom that has that many adults in it. Also, our district inclusion efforts is going to be shifting one-to-one supports into the general education classrooms. So as we are moving more and more students into the general education setting, we can have the paraprofessionals who are supporting them initially follow them into the general education class and support them there, and which reduces the need for the special education class. In a perfect world, the special education class wouldn't be there, and all of those supports would happen within the general education setting. So I'll discuss that a little bit more later tonight. And then also, finally, we've developed a panel review for all new SKIA assessments to reduce overqualification and insist that MTSS interventions are being used. So this panel will also advise our SKIA reports to ensure that proper FADE plans and progress monitoring are written into the IEPs every time, so that we're not handing out one-to-ones unnecessarily or prematurely, and to make sure that all other resources have been utilized before we go to the very restrictive designation of a one-to-one support with a student. Okay. And this is just a little update that it is not final, as we are not completely closed. And I know that Mr. Gaffney mentioned that tonight. The last time I reported to you, there were some current concerns about the MPAs and MPSs being extraordinarily high, and they are going to be higher, but perhaps not quite as much as we had initially anticipated during the mid-year report that I brought to you. However, this isn't final, and we are still paying some bills from June, so we will see some increases there. And we're, like I said, we're also just doing continued refinement. We're working with this SELPA on contracts and doing everything we can to tighten it up. The COLAs and the requested contract increases vary across the board, anywhere from 15 to, in some cases, even 30%. And that is something that we are working to really consider who we partner with and make sure that we're being the most fiscally responsible as possible. This is actually not accurate because I posted it last week. We have 2 job offers going out right now. One has been accepted for school psychologist, same thing for resource specialists. However, in the meanwhile, we did have 1 person resign. So actually, I guess it does sort of come out in the wash. We have 1 psychologist, 2 resource specialist positions open right now. I list speech pathologist because we always have that posted. We are not able to fill, those are very, very difficult to fill positions. And quite often we have to use NPAs in order to fill them. And our preference is internal hires. So we leave those posted so that we can attract people who are interested in working for the district directly. Okay, and this is the best part. This is our end of year CDAC picnic. We had an end of the year family picnic at San Mateo Park School on June 4th. We had a wonderful attendance with over 200 people joining us for lunch. And we just had a great time. Lots of families, lots of really nice positive feedback. And many kids had a good time and came out and were able to play with each other and just have fun. And finally, Amy is not able to join us tonight. She prepared this slide, however. So these are our dates for next year for CDAC. And we have, we meet on Tuesdays at 6:30. Right now, they're still via Zoom. We get better attendance that way because people find it easier to log in regardless of childcare and dinner, et cetera. We found that our meetings where we've done parent education, community education were very successful. And so we're putting more of a focus on bringing in some more education speakers and topics. So that is something that we're going to work on for next year. And there will be a topic survey at the beginning of the year. So people can give feedback about things that they might like to learn about. And I believe that is the end of my presentation for you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Heather. Opening it up to the board for clarifying questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I had a question about the speech pathologist roles. I have actually heard the same thing from just like from the community, from parents, from like teachers, and can you maybe elaborate on why it's so difficult to fill these positions? Like, I just kind of want to be aware, like, what is the like, if we have these roles open all the time and we are working with agencies, so like we know that the people are out there, right? But like, why are they, is there anything that we can do to sort of attract those people more? Like, what's the holdup? I guess.
Okay, yeah, great question. So the answer is probably bigger than my initial response, but it's twofold. One of the things is that some of the positions that we are able to fill right now are actually virtual SLPs. And so they are people who are not located here. They're located in all sorts of different places around the United States. And that makes them maybe more attracted to doing it. It's a little bit more convenient for them. And it is, it's important to note that for every virtual SLP that we have, we also have to provide an in-person para to actually physically sit with the children and supervise. So that does make it slightly more expensive when we use those NPAs. The other thing too is that the certification to be a speech and language pathologist qualifies you to work in other settings outside of education. So they could also work in clinics, they could work in hospitals, medical settings. And so we are, as a school district, competing with other industries that use the very same people and certification. So that's another challenge for us in terms of who we attract and what the kind of work that they're interested in doing with that degree.
Is the pay at those other places typically higher?
I don't know. I can find out. I think that it might be in some cases, but that would be something I would need to investigate further for you.
I can chime in there just a little bit, Heather.
Thank you.
When an employee works for our district as being part of our bargaining unit, though, the pay is definitely competitive as it compares to regional and sort of Northern California public school pay. I think there is an advantage to potentially working in a more itinerant or freelance way where you're able to pick up work from multiple agencies. And that, you know, an individual might choose to work online doing speech therapy and be able to work for more than one agency at a time. And that is more lucrative financially. I think you lose some of the consistency of, you know, you work 8 to 3:30, you know, if you're working in a public school, you're going to have some pretty solid hours that you can count on. So I think it's a mix of those things. The licensure for speech pathology is also very difficult to attain. So when younger candidates are going into school and they get to the point of deciding what career field to pursue, school pathology licensure is really significant. So I think that, you know, has the result of having fewer candidates in the pool as well. Yeah, I think those things factor into it a little bit.
I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, but I think it is pertinent to this part of the conversation. We are partnering this summer with San Jose State University with SLP interns who will be doing some comp ed work for our students. It's really symbiotic because they're getting the hours that they need to complete their certification, and we're getting compensatory minutes for free that our students are owed. And also, as Diego mentioned, it is hard to get candidates interested. And so we're developing a relationship with the local universities to attract interns that maybe we could, you know, foster a future relationship with and entice them to come work for us and become internal candidates. And we also struggle, this one last thing about the NPAs, there are no compete clauses built into our contracts. And so we do have several agency employees who are wonderful and they've had a long relationship with the district. For different reasons, if we did want to transition them over into being our own, and they would have to want that, that can be very costly too. There's usually time service requirements and also a large cost associated with, they call it buying them out. So that's another concern. I just think it's important to mention right now.
Thank you for that context.
I would like to ask Ms. Morgan, well, thank you for your report, Ms. Morgan. I would like to ask that you follow up with Mr. Chambliss about intentionally flagging certain students who are maybe in need of support, especially in the middle school setting, to be able to assist with supports and services that may not qualify for special education. I don't know if we have anything in place, perhaps through our counseling department, maybe, who can assist with, you know, if they see kids who need to be flagged and, you know, initiating us being proactive in initiating services for these students who are not, who doesn't qualify for IEPs.
Yes, thank you. Will do.
Oh, in LCAP, excuse me, and yeah, in budget.
There was something looking at this question. More comment?
No.
Huh?
Yes.
Other,
I have comments.
other clarifying questions?
I have one, and apologies if this is something I should already know, but on the chart that it shows number of initial evaluations, are those evaluations like, are they at the request of parents or referred by teachers and other school personnel?
Good question. Both. So requests can come in many forms. They may come from parents. They may be school initiated. They may be, you know, sometimes someone else involved in, like the county might get involved, or, you know, there's other people who are supporting a child who may be recommending that we look at that. We are not obligated to assess just because someone has asked us, but we are obligated to respond. And we also have child find obligations. And so we need to look at all aspects of the student and their history and everything that's going on with them, and including, as Ms. Brooks was referring to, interventions, maybe counseling, anything else that we could look at that we would want to exhaust before going to assessment. But all of those assessments were performed because it was deemed that that was the responsible thing to do for that child.
Appreciate that. And I meant to say thank you for the presentation first, but my mind like focuses on my task at hand. So, yeah, but my other, I guess, follow-up is as we see these numbers year by year, is there like a number we aim for? Is 340 good, bad? I don't know how to read this chart to say.
It's a lot. It's a high number. It's a lot of assessments, and it's time consuming. And I'm really impressed with our team that we're able to accomplish that. It's not ideal. In an ideal world, we would reduce that number and the number of DNQs would be far smaller. We want to really make sure that we're assessing students that, like I said, we've exhausted all other interventions. And we've also limited any other factors that might be contributing to them struggling. So I personally think that we overall will start to see that number decline. Also, like I said, because we were like an assessment factory for preschool this year, there's a large number that should have shown up in numbers earlier in previous years. So this year you're seeing sort of like the efforts of us to catch up.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions?
That's a comment relating, but save it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. I don't think any clarifying questions. I have comments as well. Any audience public comment?
Or just stand up.
All right.
I'm sorry, it's so formal. I know, I'm sorry. Okay, so I did want to comment on and follow up on Ms. Morgan's presentation, particularly with regard to the speech pathologist. It has been, I was on the board in 2007 or 2015, and it was a constant issue. And part of that is you cannot pay someone more for a job, even though it's like, our thought was, well, maybe we can pay speech pathologists more because we really, really need them, but they are part of the union, and there's a fixed pay grade. So you can't attract people from outside to bring them in. And so it has been a perpetual issue, just like teachers. You know, there aren't people going into the teaching profession. There are less people going into the speech pathology, and they definitely go private. It's a lot more lucrative and gives them a lot more flexibility. So, and your questions were all fabulous. Good presentation. Thank you. I'm Colleen Sullivan. I'm a community member. So this is not bad. Not bad.
Thanks, Colleen. Can we check online, Joe, if there's any public comment, please?
Yes, thank you, President Watkins. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand. And once time is expired, we will move to the next speaker. I see one speaker, Randy Painter. Randy, please go ahead. Oh,
Hello.
Are you able to?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question that I've asked before and it hasn't been addressed or appreciated as intended. So I'm going to ask it again, and I hope that now that Director Morgan, with leading this work and doing a capable job, that this question will be kind of appreciated as intended. And this question has to do with, now that the program seems to be catching up with assessments and seems to be really getting things into shape. We go back and we revisit that there were a lot of students that, and she even talks about compensatory minutes, right, for speech and language pathology. So as we talk about things for students that were missed, there have been years and years of services that have been missed for students for, I guess, diagnoses or I don't know if diagnoses is the right word, but things that have been missed that parents have flagged, that practitioners have flagged, and that it didn't get remedied through the school district and through many, many efforts, and parents eventually had to get lawyers involved and that sort of thing. And there were settlements that were made specifically with respect to special education. My question, and so when there are placements that are made via that mechanism, I don't see those placements coming into the special ed budget. Can you verify whether or not that's the case? Number one. Number two, so when there's a settlement that's made for a special ed placement, right? Not one that's done just a straight NPS, right? That's accounted for in the budget, but one that's happened through a settlement. How is that accounting made, and how do we see that in the budget? Thank you so much.
President Watkins, I do not see any other public comment at this time.
Great, thank you. Opening it up to board for comments and discussion.
Thank you, President Watkins. My question actually is a follow-up from Trustee Proctor's questions about the assessments. Heather, I'm wondering if you can, I'm trying to figure out, and this is why it's a question comment, sort of, and obviously we've seen a rise in the number of assessments. We've talked about the backlog, but we're also seeing obviously a real focus on mental health coming out of the pandemic. And I'm wondering, it's sort of a two-part question, if you can just look at your crystal ball and think, do we expect the assessments to actually increase even more because of, one, our additional focus on mental health and or the phase-in of universal TK? and the ability that we will start assessing students then too. And I'm just wondering if that's a metric that we need to be sort of concerned about, or is this just the way it is, that it's going to be in the future?
So great question, Ken. And it's a complicated one, and I agree, I don't have a crystal ball. However, I do think that the addition of our preschool efforts, the addition of the fact that we're catching up on some of these outside pieces, and that we're insisting on really, I keep using this word, but exhausting all other potential barriers to students learning before we label them as a student with a special need. And so it's very important that we do that. It's a systemic change. It requires a lot of the professional development that we're doing now. Also some of the inclusion work that I'll talk about in a little bit. So there's many kind of systemic built-in things that we're working on to be proactive. However, we are, like I said, we are responsible for assessing students when we suspect they may have a disability. It's best to catch it young, because then we can give the interventions that they need and the support they need when they're small. Sometimes with something like speech, you may be able to exit very early once you've gotten a little bit of therapy and what you need, and it doesn't become like a lifelong problem. So these are things that we want to address early, and I think that the districts, enormous efforts in the preschools and building up those programs, both for special ed and for general education, that should assist in reducing unnecessary assessments. In terms of, I mean, every child's different, so I can't say for sure that I can't say, I wish I could tell you for sure that number would go down. I anticipate that it will, based on our systemic changes and efforts, but I'll have to continue to monitor that as we go.
I think another important consideration is our intention and our doubling of our free preschool program that starts in August in a couple of months. And the design of doing that is really about having our students come into our world earlier, so that our educators can spot areas of concern, and when those areas of concern come up, say, let's get in and do speech therapy when a child is 3.5. And the research is absolutely clear on how that has lifelong positive effects when they have a really early assessment and really early intervention that leads to a phasing out of the service, and then ultimately 100% access to their core curriculum when they're older. When we wait for a child to come in when they're 5, the consequence of doing that and the delay of support that kids experience is part of what leads to a year down the line and 2 years down the line identifying a child as having either a learning disability or another, whether it's other health impairment or some other category that they might qualify for. And you're just always left as a special educator with that nagging question of, if we had started when they were 3, where would we be right now in 2nd grade and in 3rd grade with this child? So I think it might take some time to get to that threshold of seeing those evaluations come down. And for our next presentation, I'd like for us to bring back numbers that really show those out of school assessments, that show those overdue assessments that were completed, because these numbers do include assessments for kids who are attending outside of our district, but also kids who had assessments scheduled for last year. And so, you want to sort of have the number be really clear about which ones are assessments in arrears, which ones are assessments for kids that attend school, whether it be any of the parochial or private schools in the area, and then which ones are genuinely part of a process that has happened inside one of our 21 school campuses.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. Two requests to follow up on that for our next update. One is, I'd love to know if we break down our special education by sort of grade in some ways with our population, because as you said, like we will be looking at, you know, TK, K, how we bring them in earlier, and if they are phased out, you know, I'd love to see sort of that in a chart to show that, you know, these are the ones who have stuck through, these are the ones that, you know, usually depending on what the conditions are, you know, have left the program per se. I mean, I'd love to sort of just have that sort of grasp, because I don't think we've ever had that before. And then secondly, just for the public comment, it'd be great to throw in the budget numbers back in again, because we've had those in previous presentations. So thank you.
As a bit of a follow-up, but sort of tangential or bigger picture, I would say. First of all, thank you. I think, you know, one of the things that like maybe we are glossing over here is, you know, like that's buried a little bit in the story, is that there's been like significant improvements across like a variety of elements here, right? Like we have made programmatic changes, and we have made real investments in hiring and training, and we're seeing that like already show up in our student data and subgroups. And so I think it's like important to like ground in those celebrations, and that kind of leads to like, I feel like there's a story we can tell here that maybe we could strengthen a little bit. Like we're essentially saying that we believe that if we create these school complexes and this pipeline for students where they and their families feel included in their home elementary schools and are able to be in this inclusive, supportive environment, and we provide, you know, if we do this, and then we're monitoring whether or not that's happening and whether or not students and families actually feel more included. And then we're supporting all teachers, both general education and special education teachers, to you know, provide the necessary support and to have the training that they need. And we're providing, you know, curriculum and all of these various pieces and the paraeducation support. And like we're setting up these systems and structures within those schools and the programmatic supports, and we're tracking whether or not, you know, how training is being received, and how curriculum is being utilized, and, you know, we're doing classroom visits, like all of those sorts of things, and we're seeing whether or not that's a thing. And then we're investing in early education and early evaluation, and, you know, then we're like tracking how that, right, like we're making all these arguments that if we do this and this and this and this, then we anticipate we will see this thing, right? And so we will see a significant increase in how our students in special education are performing, because we have a theory that engaging in all of these changes, you know, or these theories about what will make the change. And I feel like I think there's a way we kind of share, like in my mind, like this is all like really powerful information that you share, but it feels sort of like isolated from like the bigger like picture in terms of where we're trying to go, and like some way just in terms of like how we share that. And so I just wonder if there's a way we, as we like look ahead to future presentations and just the way we share this here and with the community, that like this is the work that we're doing to make the change that we know we're going to see in 3 years. And so then we're actually going to monitor in like these specific ways and report back in these specific ways, like to the point that I made around the LCAP, like, so then we can say, you know, for example, let's just pick the, you know, the way that we're altering the school complexes, right? Like, what do we want that exactly to do? And then how do we know whether or not it's doing that? And if it's doing it, like, then we're going to say, awesome, we're going to continue to invest in making sure that this is like an experience that all of our kids have. And if it's not, what are like the tweaks that we need to make? And I think that there's a lot of that you all are probably doing all the time. And like, you know, I know that we're like really, everyone at the district is really engaged in data-driven decision-making and looking at all of that. But I would like love to see us just like make that I know I've shared before a little bit about like the strategic plan, and I know we have like these various pieces, and we have the diverse students resolution and all the inclusion work that's happening, and like there's just a lot of pieces that I think, I guess this is a long-winded way of saying, I actually think they like come together very cohesively to tell a story about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're monitoring that, and what we hope to see. And I wonder if there's a way for us to just like tell that really powerfully, because I think it's a really powerful story, and I think we're already seeing the progress of that. And I don't always know that I like feel like quite all of that power in the way that I feel like we could. And so I think, yeah, that's just like the one piece that I'm left with. As I look at this, but I just really appreciate all of the work that's gone into, you know, the updates and changes that we've made. And I do think there's a through line to the data changes that we're seeing already. And I think we'll obviously continue to see that as we get CASP data and, you know, continue to look into that. But yeah.
Thank you.
You can't like say anything after that.
No, I just like that's what I thought. I was like, also,
cool, moving on. Does anybody else have something? Just was not the point. All right, well, we're kicking it back over to you, Heather, for inclusion.
Okay, all right, so thank you very much. And I am now once again going to share my screen, and bear with me as I pull up the correct slides. Oh, where that's not it, shoot. Let me see if I can find it. I think I had it buried somewhere here. Out of there, here we go. Here we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this slide okay. And I am here this evening to also share our inclusion task force report with all of you. So this is our lofty group of participants, and I also wanted to just thank several of them for being here tonight. I know that they're in attendance, and I appreciate that they're here to support the hard work that we did this year. I'm going to see if I can minimize this a little bit so I can see it better. Okay. We did have a broad cross-section of participants. We looked at everything that you can possibly think of in terms of who participated. So we have SMETA, CSEA, site administration, district office administration, leads from human resources, the business office, ed services, of course, special education. We also have parents from gen ed backgrounds, also CDAC parents. We have several people here who are actually fall under more than one category. And we also have other positions, social workers, TOSAs, and San Mateo, Foster City, elementary, middle. So everything you can think of, we want, because everything that we do in inclusion is going to impact all of those groups significantly, and we need their input to make sure that we're successful in our efforts. So over the course of the year, we met on these dates from 2 to 4, sometimes longer and sometimes on additional dates for a little extra work, but those are our main meeting dates. And one of the things that we worked very hard on this year was refining this vision statement for inclusion for our district. I'll read it to you, and we feel that this summarizes the work that we did this year, the research we did, and our beliefs as a district. The San Mateo-Foster City School District intentionally fosters school communities where inclusion is the norm, where each child belongs and is challenged to grow and achieve. Because we believe that inclusion benefits everyone, we strive to support and empower students with diverse strengths and needs. This vision statement will be our guiding light throughout the next few years as we implement more inclusion in our district. So we have 3 goals. These are overarching goals. We think of it almost like the way that we write an IEP, in that these are things that we strive for our whole district to be able to say that they do. And goal 1 is that schools will prioritize belonging for all students and families. Goal 2 is that faculty and staff at all sites will assume responsibility for all students. And goal 3 is that environments and actions reflect our values. So one of the most important things to pay attention also in our work is that inclusion is not only just academic inclusion. It needs to be looked at through the lens of also your physical location and then social interactions and social opportunities. Because of that, and when I get in a slide or two, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our plan and our timeline. But because of that, these 3 areas can be very specific and unique to a school site. And so our work as an inclusion task force was coming up with like the district vision and guidance. But as we looked at this more carefully, we realized that the individual sites are going to have to take on some leadership over the next 3 years, as each of these areas, academic, physical, and social, will and should look different depending on the site itself and how it's built, what the classrooms look like, what the playground is shaped like, where students eat, what the bus looks like, what the academic programming is. You know, is it a Montessori school? Is it a STEM school? Is it a bilingual school? So all of those things will come into play. And so just to keep in mind that these are 3 lenses that we look through when we talk about inclusion. So because that being said, our plan for 23-24 is to have 2 target schools. In the work that we've done with Changing Perspectives, Sam Drazen, who will be partnering with us again next year, he highly recommended that we keep it small in terms of developing a really successful plan for 2 schools that are ready to make that work happen, and that we expand it the following year. So this is the plan for next year, is to start with both Foster City and George Hall. Ideally, we'll have an inclusion TOSA leading this work, and we have budgeted for that. However, it will also require the principals of those schools and their leadership teams to take on some of this work. And that work includes leading the mindset shift work and supporting gen ed staff. And that has already started. For the first time, I think ever, special education had a full audience of general education teachers in our summer training, and this was our kickoff opportunity. So they were joined by their SPED peers, but this was a great opportunity for us to be able to start with sharing our vision and our goals, and making sure that everyone in our schools is on board with following along with our goals and our vision. So they're going to have to also develop goals and a personalized vision statement for their sites, because like I said before, they're unique. This team will also oversee site-based professional development and the skill development of support staff. And we're looking in 24-25 to adding 4 more schools to that. Of course, using what we learn over the course of 23-24. The target schools that we're aiming for working with for 24-25 are Meadow Heights, Sunnybrae, Highlands, and Brewer. Okay, so this is our timeline for next year and sort of our priority areas. So as I already mentioned, there are the target schools where site teams will be developing their site-specific goals and priorities about academic, physical, and social inclusion. Also, we did discuss this early this evening, the preschool inclusion. So we will be increasing the number of students with IEPs in general education preschool classes, and we are reducing 1 mild mod SDC classroom, with all of those students being placed into general education preschool classrooms, along with the support that they previously had in their SDCs. Also, we'll be increasing educational setting minutes in general education. I say by 10%, please keep in mind, this is per IEP, and so it does vary by student, but our goal is about 10%. And that will happen at each student's annual. That's where we revisit minutes in the educational setting. Then, of course, we have our professional development plan, which was already initiated last week for summer 23. And we will continue to expand our Best Buddies chapters. We currently have 5 schools, including Foster City School and the 4 middle schools. So we're going to continue to support the development of those and continue to both, it's a little bit of financial support, but mostly just within the constructs of their school day that they have support to be able to provide a location for kids to get together, do activities together. We have one school that's looking into doing some field trips together. So that's really exciting, and we will continue to grow the Best Buddies chapters. That's for 23-24. 24-25, of course, most importantly, we need to assess how the previous year went. So we'll be looking at the 23-24 data and adjusting goals accordingly. We will be adding the 4 focus schools and the ongoing professional development and a focus on middle school for 25 and 26 preparation. And middle school has already started their mindset shift kickoff as well. So we are working towards that as the students grow, because since we're starting with inclusion with the preschool program, obviously we're going to be able to grow them within the gen ed program as they grow up as much as possible. Preschool is the perfect time to start because that is one of the most successful times that all children can be together. And then we're going to be adding primary like K2 inclusion and continuing the reduction of preschool mild mod programs for 24-25. And this is our ideal goal for 25-26 is that 3 to 5 inclusion. So these are some of those children that started off this year, starting to go up into the upper elementary age. Also middle school inclusion, increasing hybrid programs and their percent of time in general education. And that means students that might be in a mod severe class may spend more of their time in a mild mod class, or students in a mild mod class might spend more of their time in general education. And also mod severe students can also spend time in general education so that everybody gets as much possible access to general education peers, activities, resources, and curriculum. And then obviously the ongoing professional development and data review. And I wanted to intentionally keep this very flexible because I anticipate that we will learn a lot in the next year, and we need to apply what we learn in 23-24 to the following 2 years. This is what the professional development has looked like so far and what we propose for the coming year. So elementary, which would be TK through 5, general education teachers and special education teachers have access to the kickoff, which is geared around a mindset shift, and it's led by Supporting Inclusive Practices, which is a grant funded by the CDE. All general education will have professional development in October with Sam Drazen from Changing Perspectives. He's also the one that's going to be leading the 2 focus schools in their work. Middle schools, all general education middle school teachers also had the kickoff. They will have McAllister Wynn from the neurodiverse teacher and Dr. Amanda Gall also presented to the middle school teachers for their inclusion kickoff. And then the 2 focus schools for 23-24 will have ongoing inclusion development with the support of Changing Perspectives and the Inclusion TOSAs leadership teams. These are just sort of guiding principles in terms of what inclusive educators do, and our team identified these areas as priorities. So inclusive educators have humility, they're curious about others, they have robust cultural intelligence, there's a visible commitment, that they effectively collaborate, and they are aware of their bias. And these are areas that we will continue to keep at the forefront of our training for our teachers to make sure that everybody's values reflect our vision and our goals for the department and for the district. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Heather. Opening it up to the board for any clarifying questions.
Do you have, I guess I'm looking at the timeline on page 8. It talks about developing site-specific goals and identifying priorities in these 3 areas. Can you give some examples of like what these goals could potentially look like, or like what changes we would want to see on a campus to kind of move these?
Yes. So if you think about each of our campuses, they are very unique, and they present different sort of challenges in terms of inclusion. For example, the Baywood Library is on a second story. So that presents a barrier for certain students. It also, would contribute to our decision making on where we place certain programs. So that's something that's a unique challenge for that school. And when they become a focus school, or when it comes to their turn, that's something that team is going to have to address and think about what they will do to make sure that all of the areas of their school are inclusive. That's just one example. It just comes to mind. It's an easy one. But in terms of, so each school does have, unique focuses. So like they have to look at what programs do they offer, and how will those programs be inclusive for students with specific needs. They also have to look at like, what does their playground look like, or how is their NPR shaped, and where is it? How do you access it? How do you get to the playground? All of those things will need to be discussed by the team. And those are just physical things, but also we're going to have to look at the academic areas too. Academic will probably be slightly more universal, but like I said, some of our schools, we have Montessori schools. Montessori settings are very specific in the way that they set up their classrooms and the way that their curriculum is presented. And so we're going to have to make sure that our students who are mainstreaming or spending more time in general education in those classrooms are prepared for and can expect what they see when they walk into a Montessori classroom. And so those are some examples of some specific areas where schools will need to be, the site teams will be working on developing those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question, Heather, around so for the target schools, I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about how you're thinking about kind of just like tracking the impacts of some of the work that's happening. So like, is there baseline, and then like, what does that look like for us to get a sense of like where a school starts and then where they end kind of after?
Right. So first of all, the Inclusion Task Force did 2 large outreaches for collecting information via Google, surveys. They did one in the fall, one a little later in the spring, just to compare. And we collected information from everyone, parents, community members, kids, teachers, with some very specific questions about inclusion and potential barriers and successes. So where are you feeling it? Where are we already doing it? What are some hopes that you have? And then what are some challenges that you've had for yourself or for others or for your classroom? And so we do have that as a starting point. Additionally, when we first started talking about doing the Inclusion Task Force, both George Hall and Foster City had already done a lot of work with their gen ed teachers around the mindset. So those were 2 schools that were very ready to move forward with more, aggressive sort of initiatives in terms of inclusion. And they both have principals that have been involved with those schools for a long time and had been working on this. So in terms of like low hanging fruit, it made sense for those 2 schools to be the most prepared for moving forward. And then they'll continue to do with the support, and Sam will be working closely with both of them, as well as their inclusion TOSAs and their principals in building these teams that do sort of the site version of what we've done as a district team in determining. And they can have, we do have sort of our baseline data now with, where we're starting, and then they'll be able to collect ongoing throughout the year, updates and get some feedback. Once they start implementing some programs, they'll be able to see, how maybe people's attitudes are changing or what new challenges might arise, but they're going to have to monitor that ongoing throughout the year.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other clarified questions?
Any public in-person questions or comments? Joe, can we open up for public comment, please?
Yes. Thank you, President Watkins. Oh, I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand. Speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. Once time has expired, we will move to the next speaker. No public comment on this item, but if I can mention PTA council member.
For this item. Yep. I have it on my list. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I'll just really quick as a follow-up comment, Heather, to that. I think I'd be really interested in us gathering some baseline and then end of year, like very targeted data from these target schools. Specifically, like I'm looking at the goals, right? Like I could see a set of questions around how a school prioritizes belonging, how people feel like faculty and staff assume responsibility, do environments and actions reflect values, and then like building out some questions around like the various components of inclusion, like within each of those goals, and getting a sense of what does that look like at the very beginning of the year. And then these things happen, and then what does that look like? How is it shifted? Obviously we can pull data and like then we can make some through line to like how it impacts actual student achievement data as a result of that. And I think it's important not just for that to live in special education, right? Like that's like across the board, across the school site. How do people feel about those things? And then how does that shift? Because I think it'll give us really important data then to think about like expanding the target schools and what needs to shift. So for me, it feels like bigger than just like kind of the data that we already have. There's like a need to have like very targeted data related to the specific goals that we're trying to address. So I'd be super interested in that. But this is like overall, like really appreciate the work of the task force. I think it's like great to be really grounded in like this vision statement, to have very specific goals, and to have like a really well thought out plan in terms of how we're going to achieve that. Like, I think it's incredible, and I'm really excited to see. That's just like the one push I would have.
Thank you, and agreed.
I was just gonna say thank you again for this report, but also thanks to everybody on the task force for all the work that they've been doing throughout this year and ongoing. I really appreciated the goals and how they were set out, and I think just goal number one, I think every student family wants to feel like they belong, and so I'm glad that that's something that kind of starting out with, but also really appreciated the characteristics of an inclusive educator and how those are laid out. It just seems very thoughtful. So thank you for the work, and looking forward to hearing how this first year at Foster City and George Hall go.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'll just follow up and also say thank you for all your hard work. Following up on what President Watkins had mentioned, the last one, I feel like there's definitely a story there. I mean, when you think about where we were before, it's like night and day in some ways. You think about, you know, all the issues that we're having. I feel like there's just more of a grasp, more intentional, more focus, more community building, bringing everyone in together to work on this. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's greatly attributed to your leadership, Heather and Diego. I think you guys have done fantastic, and all the support, all the teams. It's pretty amazing, and I can't wait to see, you know, how this shows up in the following years, and then also, as President Watkins mentioned, you know, in the data that shows up too. And we're already seeing fruits of it, but it's something that is, when you hear about all these other things that are going on and these little things that blow up and everything else, you forget sometimes about all the positives that happen. And this is a positive story. And I think that it should be recognized, and you guys should be recognized, because it's amazing. It is really amazing. So I just want to thank you guys for that.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you so much, Heather. We will move over to PTA Council update. And then we're gonna take a quick bathroom break after that.
Thank you, Mrs. Watkins. Marissa, you should be able to speak now.
Oh, hi, this is Marissa McMurray, President of San Mateo-Foster City PTA Council. I had raised my hand to speak earlier only to say that we share in the joy that the Ed Foundation provided, and our update last week was really the main update we had, which was just shy of 50,000 hours with just over half of our units reporting. And that is a huge benefit to the kids in the district, and we're pleased to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We will be back in 5 minutes at 7:46. Thanks, everybody.
I'm glitching on my screen here, so I was just having some fun with it.
Glitching over here. You're dancing. There we go.
I look like a Roblox person,
Yes.
but as long as you can hear me. If my audio gets funky, I'll just turn the video off. Oh, you have food.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like, what the heck? They're like, they have to go powwow so they can team up on all the 500 questions they're going to ask when I present right now. What is it?
Do that. We would never do that. Yeah.
What is
Starboard.
it?
Starboard.
Oh, Starboard. Oh, man. Orange chicken salad. Did anybody get that? That one's so good. It's like, I think it's like not promotional, but you know, it's like a seasonal one.
Yeah.
Orange chicken salad.
Pie is amazing.
Yeah, I've gotten that one before. I got the chopped chicken.
I got a chopped chicken.
I was like, why are you guys having salad? Who does that?
I had a bigger,
Apparently all of
heavy
you.
meal earlier today, so otherwise I would have gotten.
Is that a thing? You have one heavy meal a day?
I overate. I need something lighter.
I think this meeting might still be like in progress.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm like blowing into my hands all night because the room I'm in, it is like 57 degrees in this room.
Don't you have control over the heat?
I'm trying to get it to go, but it won't kick on.
It's starting to get cold with that door open.
Oh,
That's why I put my jacket on.
Yeah, let's close it.
I mean, because
I'm dressing for summer. I don't care.
Oh, thanks, Scott.
I mean, it does keep.
It's just the
warm,
outside.
But I mean, it's cold.
Outside one?
I always joke I wish I had like little mini heaters or like foot heaters. Right. Like in under here. That'd be really nice.
We're still supposed to swap out these chairs, you remember?
We are, but not today.
All right. Guys ready?
Can you have one?
Well, we are being recorded.
I'm pretty sure this whole thing is like live. Well, I chow down on myself. Human moments. Alrighty, Joe, we're ready to go.
Okay, you're on.
You're like, you were on this whole time. Welcome, everybody, to our dining conversation. So, you know, here we are. Okay, moving on to 8A, School Climate and Safety Report. Over to you, Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you so much, President Watkins, members of the board. Very, very excited to be able to elevate this conversation for the board's consideration. Tonight's presentation and tonight's discussion is really a way of starting with our community, and I'll share in just a second, starting with our community, the opportunity to to think about multiple avenues of receiving data and to put those data points in front of us and to talk through what the data means. As any public school educator in the country will tell you, the last couple of years have really challenged us to be more aware and more cognizant.
You're on mute. You're muted. You're still muted.
Joe, if you could just share the item for, it's telling me that my device won't allow me to show a document and also speak at the same time, but Joe, if you could,
okay.
It's the item, the school climate report.
Yes, give me one moment to bring it up.
Absolutely, thank you, Joe. And while you do, I'll just finish my remarks here. We're all paying attention to how kids are doing in school emotionally as much as they are academically. And as a district, over the past 5 years, we've tackled some very difficult work regarding the approach to trying to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And I'm going to stop my video. And this work has been the subject of a lot of conversation and a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. And tonight's report is an opportunity for the Board of Trustees and for the community to go deeper into the data. And what you'll see with this particular item and with the data from this item is a couple of things stand out right from the beginning. As a school district, our purposeful efforts to keep kids in school more, keep kids in their classroom more, are having a very significant and positive effect. And that's resulting in kids being counseled more and having more restorative conversations and having less suspensions, having fewer suspensions. So a very common question and a very common concern to come up when I share that data is, well, kids just are committing the same offenses, but they're just not being disciplined for it. They're not getting in trouble for acting inappropriately. And so we're very fortunate in California to have a survey instrument called the California Healthy Kids Survey that is really, really powerful in the sense that it allows you as a tool. Joe, if you could go to page 3, it allows you as a tool to survey both students, staff, and parents about their experiences on campus, but it has two really important facets. One is that the survey is anonymous, which means that anybody sitting down, including the students, including the staff, including the parents, to take the survey, nobody knows that it is you giving those responses. As a district, we are not the ones collecting the scores and we're not putting them into the report. We receive the report. So it's truly an external avenue for us. And then second, and equally important, is it's confidential. When responses are given, there's no report back to the district. So it meets a criteria that's very hard to reach with surveys, in that it's anonymous and it's confidential, but it's also tied to the groupings and the categories that kids and parents and staff associate with. So we'll tell you how different groups of students respond to different questions, and it'll tell you how different groups of staff will. So an example is how do your new staff respond to questions? How do more veteran staff respond to questions? And it will give you that sort of disaggregated data. And what we're finding is that through these survey responses, when kids are asked questions like, have you ever seen another student with a gun or a knife at school? What we're seeing is the response to that question is no, and it is declined than before the pandemic. So in 2018, as an example, 13% of our elementary school students responded, yes, I have seen somebody with a gun or knife at school, and that number has decreased this year. At the same time, we asked middle school students that same year, and 17% of middle school students said they had seen another student with a gun or a knife on campus, and that number has also decreased this year. So it confirms that drug use is less common now than before the pandemic, because it's bridging that gap between what we document getting kids either in a disciplinary consequence like a suspension or a counseling session versus what's actually happening, because kids will often come home and tell their parents a bunch of stuff happens at school that the school administration doesn't know about. There are things that happen outside of the purview of those in charge or those responsible for discipline. So this survey gets at the frequency of things happening on our campuses, and it confirms that students, for example, have had rumors and lies being spread about them less often than before the pandemic, and that you can tie that one directly back to our decision to implement Yonder. But these pieces of information are very powerful. The report itself is typical. I want to thank Diego and Dr. Christian Rubalcaba and Nancy Bowie for being able to play such an integral role in creating this report. And Joe, if you could go to page 7. And this report does a couple of different things. It gives very clear links to where this information lives, because I want members of the public and members of the board to feel free to go deeper into this analysis. On page 7, you're going to see that we have a very easy to see visual that shows the very large drop in suspensions that are happening on our campuses prior to the pandemic and post-pandemic. Again, dismantling the school to prison pipeline being a huge part of that, the design behind it and the reason behind it. And then once we get past what our discipline data is, we start to really go into that survey data, and we give a really clear explanation. If you can go, Joe, to page 9, you can get a very clear explanation of where others might find reports for our district and how easy it is to find these reports. And these reports, I have to admit, they're very lengthy, but they are really interesting. So members of the community that want to go and spend that time, we give you the website, we show you how to do it. You can really not just look up ours. If you're just curious to see how our responses differ from those in Redwood City or those in Jefferson or those in Woodside, I will add the caveat that not every school district is as transparent with the data as ours is. We're one of the districts that reports the most data in this web portal, and there are some that report nothing, there are some that report just a little bit. So I do want to add that caveat because you might go in and say, hey, I didn't find this other school district's data, and it really is sort of a district to district decision in that sense. If you could go to the next page, on page 10, part of the reason we put this visual in the report, even though it relates to San Mateo County data, and as the largest district in the county, we certainly are a part of this data, but it does show in a very clear way how the shift has happened pre-pandemic and post-pandemic in terms of how kids feel. That sense in this survey, they're asked a question of, in the past 12 months, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more, that you stop doing some usual activities. And that response has increased close to 10% in just that short time frame. So it really just confirms where kids are emotionally. And then the rest of the report is very, very predictable. So if you go to the very next page, Joe, on page 11, what you'll see is we have the direct results from these surveys that show 2018-19 data and 2022-2023 data. We have a summary or a description analysis with often QR code links that will take you to places we feel are important and relate to that survey response. And we have absolutely selected certain questions because, again, the reports that you'll find, these are often in the close to 100-page range. So we wanted to really, show that selection process to get at what we felt were the most crucial aspects. And my commentary to the board and to the community is that we have an opportunity to elevate the importance of creating more belonging in our schools for students and staff. We have the opportunity to teach kids conflict resolution in our schools, and we have the opportunity to build those bridges with our families at home. And if we do those things, we will see very powerful changes in terms of how our elementary and middle school students report feeling safety on campus. So that's what I have for the board this evening. I know we put this out a couple of weeks ago. We have sent it to the entire community. I do want to thank those who have responded back with questions and other comments. I've gotten a lot of feedback about this topic. When we send out reports to our community, we do check our metrics. I think the last time I spoke to Diego Perez, it was nearing 1,000 folks who had opened this, and the average amount of time they were spending in this report was about 12 minutes. So that's very powerful in terms of sort of confirming that this report has landed in people's inboxes, and when they open it, they're taking some time to dig into it. And with that, Joe, you can stop projecting, and I'll turn it over to the board for questions or comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. Opening it up to the board right now for clarifying questions.
You mentioned convening school safety and campus climate meetings.
Yeah.
Is that going to be at all of the schools, or are there certain schools that are sort of at the forefront of needing more discussion around this?
We'll be holding those at every school. We just think it's important to just increase that visibility on the topic, and to be able to give all of our stakeholders a chance to share with us, because we think a lot of their perspectives are going to help us continue to improve campus climates and school safety.
Any other clarifying questions? All right, any in-person public comments? Joe, public comment from the audience, please.
Certainly. Thank you, President Watkins. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand. Speakers will have 3 minutes to give the remarks, and once time has expired, we will move to the next speaker. We'll wait a moment to give people opportunity to raise their hand. President Watkins, I don't see any public comment at this time.
Thank you. Board comments, discussion.
I have comments. I'm not really sure. They're not organized in my mind, so they're just gonna come out. But appreciate this report. Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. This is a lot of information, and it took me more than 12 minutes to go through it, but appreciate it. Average. Yes, I'm above average. I think that this information is great, and I like that there's certain things that are trending more in the positive direction. However, I'm still concerned about a lot of the data, especially that we're seeing from middle school, I guess parents and teachers. And so I know that there's a tremendous amount of focus on the middle schools in terms of wellness and having more counselors and more administrators and just really focusing on the middle school experience. So I am hoping that we will see that data also trend more in the positive direction. I think that, it makes me a little sad to see that the percentage of teachers that think that students are well behaved or motivated to learn is so low. I hope that students can prove otherwise going forward, but also to see, students and parents that also feel that the middle school experience is also not the best for them is also something that concerns me. So anyways, appreciate the information, but I'm hoping, as we continue to track this information, we start seeing things head in even more of a positive direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on Allison, I mean, I think, it's been like really powerful to have these kinds of reports come out in a variety of different areas, because I think, just being transparent about where we are, and like Trustee Proctor said, right, like this is not all great, right? Like some of this is pretty disparaging in terms of like how our students and our families and our teachers feel and the perspective, that they have, but you can only work to like improve what when you know where something is, right? And so being like very transparent about kind of what the status is, and then thinking about like how do we then move forward. And I think there's been a lot of work already that's been put into place, and I think I look forward to seeing how that does or doesn't translate into some of this qualitative data. We've seen some of the data around some of the quantitative pieces moving in the right direction, and hope that then that translates to some of the qualitative feelings of inclusion and belonging and safety. But as we continue to monitor this in a really deep way, and then make intentional decisions as a result of it. But again, like we've never looked at the data like in this comprehensive way, right? And so you can't even like begin to like really think about a strategic plan to address it unless you're starting from that as a baseline. But just echo a lot of what Trustee Proctor said as well in terms of some of the I think a lot about actually building from some of the work that Heather was talking about in terms of like mindset and the inclusion work. I think a lot about that in terms of the feeling about like students being motivated or students being well behaved, and how much like a mindset around what students are like. It's not actually on students to prove whether or not they want to learn or that, right? Like we think about our role as like adults in these systems in terms of like how do we view our students, and how does then our belief about what they can and cannot do impact what they end up doing, right? And like the data around how that translates is like very clear. And so I just think about kind of that like self-fulfilling process here, and just some of that work around mindset. And I know that we're doing a lot of work around training, and how do we just support it's like a really challenging, I get it's like a really, really, I mean, teaching in general is like an exceptionally challenging, and it's even more so now, like just in the context of everything that's kind of happening. So But I just think that's a really important piece. So just appreciate these continued conversations. It's like, this is the work, and, you know, talking about data and how we use this to drive our decisions and our processes, I think is really important. So thank you for all of the effort that went into this report. I'm glad that there's been such community engagement around this. That's really exciting, and look forward to continuing to dig into this.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot as we have visited the various school sites, about ways that that the adults on campus can sort of show that they respect the student and respect their opinions and really value them as individuals, as opposed to sort of entities within the classroom that are there to like follow instruction and be compliant and sort of fit within the idea of what like the adult decides is acceptable within the classroom. And, you know, I think just seeing in certain schools, there's more student-led activities, or there's more breaking out into smaller groups, or there is, you know, if you have a set of classroom rules that are on the wall that all the students have sort of contributed to and have made, like they have decided collectively those are the rules that they want to abide by. Those kinds of things where we value the student, I really want to see, I think, more opportunities and focus on how we can show like how the adults in the room can show students that they are valued and that they do have, you know, that their opinions are valued. Because I'm looking at, for example, on page 17, where only 32% of the 7th grade students responding said that, you know, yes, all the time there's a grown-up on campus who listens to me when I have something to say. Like, that to me is like, it's kind of heartbreaking, right? Because, you know, less than a third of the students think that there is always someone who like values their opinion, is there to like be there with a listening ear. It just, you know, it shows that like that feeling of I guess psychological safety is not there. And I think it's really important that that we elevate student voices and with respect to these like campus climate meetings. I really want to encourage, you know, more student participation and hearing from the students who are there on campus about the ways that the grown-ups in the room and on the campus can show up better for them.
Other board comments?
I want to follow up on what Trustee Proctor and President Watkins had mentioned before. I want to thank you for the presentation and for the report. I also want to focus on middle school, but one thing that we talked about in data, what President Watkins mentioned, is that I know Superintendent Ochoa, you're very good at saying, hey, look, we're going to present the data no matter what it is, whether it's great or whether it's bad, and then we're going to analyze it, right? And so the idea is like, we're not hiding and just showing just really positive stuff. There's negative stuff there that we know we need to improve on. And I think what it shows is, it shows in comparison to other school districts, like, yeah, this is something we're focusing on, and it's here in a report, and here it's for everyone to see. And so I want to thank you for that, because it's about being transparent in that sense. Middle school is so hard, and I want to sort of focus on that, because it's just, I know we've talked about this many times in our one-on-ones, and the idea is, and it feels like to me that you see this in the data. I mean, you know, as a student, you're in elementary school for 6 or 7 years if you're in TK in that one school with one teacher all year round, right? You've built this bond, there's this community. And all of a sudden you go to middle school, which is only for 3 years, and you start going from class to class. There's less sort of like one-on-one. And I feel like that's what we're seeing in the data. And I'm wondering whether or not there's a difference between our comprehensive middle schools and then also our TK or K through 8th grade schools, because I would expect the data in our TK to K to 8th grade schools to be like, yeah, there's a real belonging there because those students have been there for, maybe 10 years or so, right? All within one school. And you can really build something there versus our more comprehensive middle schools. And middle school is really hard. And I feel like I would love to see how we can bring in sort of the community from the elementary schools and build those bonds into the middle schools. And whether it's like, we've gone back to focusing on complexes, whether we bring in, the 5th graders, rising 5th graders in to see the schools, like how do we build those connections, not only with the students and build the bonds with the adults and the teachers and staff that are there, but then also with the parents to know that, hey, look, middle school is different, right? It is. And there's difference. Kids are going to be going from classroom to classroom, and sometimes they will have less connections. But I think we're missing out on some stuff because there's just that connection and that community that's lost a little. And so the other thing I'm gonna say is that these are like basically post-COVID numbers in some ways, the first year out. Now that we're seeing, all of our students starting this year will have gone through our middle schools all in classrooms versus some of them being online distance learning. So I'm curious to see how the data shows up the following year. But I do, middle schools, I feel like we need to either build stronger bonds or build a community. There's just something more that we need to do just for our students so they know that they belong and that they feel safe and they feel connected. And I know that it takes time. I know that we brought back, like, student governments are doing great things. There's more engagement. We brought more parents back in. But I always just feel like feels like there's more we can do. So just great report. I know there's good and bad stuff, but also shows there's more work for us to do. So thank you.
President Watkins, if I can just chime in, I want to give Trustee Brooks if she had any remarks, but I did want to say something before we close out the item.
It's good. Go for it.
Right. We work in a field where every single year the staff and students and parents want the school to have a great year. That's the one thing about our business is that, we have, just take for instance, Abbott Middle School had a difficult school year. And you all approved a dynamic leadership team for next year. We have a restorative teacher on special assignment joining, strong counselors. Everything that happened this year that was a struggle, that we have it all cataloged. We know exactly where we missed opportunities. This new team has a playbook for how to build for the whole year. So it's just sort of a wonderful thing to work in a profession like ours where we're going to do another school year and take everything we learned and grow from it. So I look at all the data as it's a starting point for me and saying 22 is going to become 32, 32 is going to become 42. And that's just how I approach the work of of reflecting on it, digging into it, talking about it, and ultimately creating that change we all want to see.
Superintendent Ochoa. All right, moving on to 8B, school visitations.
All right, this is a great conversation starter for the board. I'll make very, very brief remarks. And Joe, if you can open up the item for the school partner visit. Thanks to Diego P. for working with me on these visuals. But this is a conversation topic for the board. We started it a couple of weeks back. We intended to discuss it at our last meeting, but ended up pushing it forward to tonight. And it's really giving the board a couple of options to discuss. The one being a continuation of our in-place school visitation process where the members of the board and I visit schools according to basically a 1 hour schedule for each visit. And we get into a school, we take a look at 5 to 6 classrooms. We visit a common space like a playground or a cafeteria or a library, and then we'll come back with the principal and we'll debrief with them before my phone starts beeping and we say we're going to get to our next school. And usually, as these typically end, after the 11 o'clock visit, we sort of all remark to each other that, and I wish other people could see what we saw today in these classrooms, because we're always very moved by the work that we see happening. So on the next page, Joe, if you could, is a visual that describes a different type of process where the school board do not get together in groups of more than 3. So we basically have, in this example, Trustee Trin and myself. In example B, Trustee Watkins President Watkins and Trustee Proctor, and then in that C group, Vice President Chin and Clerk Brooks together. I give examples of who else might be there. So maybe with President Watkins and Trustee Proctor, we have David Chambliss, and then with Vice President and Clerk, we have Diana Tavares, and then we show some symbols and we have an explanation on this page of who else we might invite to participate in here. And you see some logos there from the Sanctuary Task Force, from the Ed Foundation, from both the City of San Mateo, the City of Foster City, from County Office, High School District, as a way to suggest that another alternative is to basically run these visits simultaneously, which would allow us to stay a little bit longer at each school and bring more people with us who are stakeholders and partners with us in this process. And the one, well, not one, but one caveat there is that the board is not all together when we do this. So that's sort of the line in the sand. In the current grouping, we're all together, seeing the same thing at the same time. And then in this alternate option, we're not all together. We're in 3 different groups, spending a longer amount of time, but we're bringing in other partners with us. So I wanted to reflect that as a visual, and now I'll stop talking and give the board and those in the public who want to chime in an opportunity to discuss. And if the board, as a result of this discussion, feels like they want to give direction, I'm happy to take that. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Superintendent Ochoa. Clarifying questions.
One of the things that, and this is maybe more of a question, more of like a potential thought, is that I have heard that, like, for example, if we have kids at one school, you know, we kind of, that's kind of like our experience of the school district, whatever school our kids are at, as parents or, you know, as parents. And so I know that it can be really helpful to kind of hear like what's happening at some of the other schools, to have like a transfer of ideas, you know, that like each school is doing something that could be helpful to like the other schools, right? And so I'm wondering if in this process, if there is a way for us to also facilitate, you know, maybe, I'm not sure what I'm envisioning exactly, like maybe like pairing schools or like putting groups of schools together that might be really well positioned to like learn from each other. I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I do think, you know, we as board members this past year, we had the opportunity to go see all of the schools. And that's a lot for like, that's a lot to sort of expect for any person to do every year. But I'm just thinking like, is there a way that we can, for example, like just have like, for like, if the PTA or, you know, if there's a way for us to sort of facilitate that. Sorry, this is kind of rambly, but you know, you get what I mean.
I do. I think I would want to talk a little bit more about it, to really define who might be in that group, to really think about, you know, the timing behind something like that, because I think, you know, visiting those schools and being a part of that process, you know, it's an eye-opener. And you know, the 6 of us saw some really powerful work happening in our schools. And so I see the desire behind how can we have these schools partner or think together, work together, see what they're doing. But I just would want to talk a little bit more about that.
We can talk more about that when we get to the discussion part too.
Yeah.
So, are there any other clarifying questions? Okay. Opening it up for public comment then, audience. Joe, can you open up for Zoom, please?
Yes, thank you, President Watkins. Good evening. I'll be calling on speakers during public comment in random order. To our attendees, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom meeting platform now. Attendees that have called in can dial *9 to raise their hand. Speakers will have 3 minutes to give their remarks, and once time has expired, we will move to the next speaker. President Watkins, I don't see any public comment at this time.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Joe, can I just ask, do you have a recording where you say that, or do you say it exactly the same way every time?
I have a script and I do it live.
All right. Discussion, comments, thoughts.
No, you go.
Just to comment on Trustee Trend's idea, maybe considering by district. I mean, we are assigned to districts, so maybe we should focus on the schools in our district, and then at large can kind of overlap. Maybe, I don't know if that has been considered.
I think the at-large is going to become by district, right? So starting in the fall of next year. So yeah,
for now.
Yeah.
So I'll start. I'll follow up on that. I do think that the districts do play a little bit of a role in it. I think that, you know, as after the elections of 2024, everybody will be in a specific district. which there are going to be at least 4 schools that you're sort of in your district. But I feel like, you know, obviously there's more than 4 times a year, so therefore you'll be able to see some other schools outside your district, which I think is really good, because I don't think we should be as focused just saying this is my only district and that's all I care about. I just want to raise that this is odd for me because I did raise this originally with Superintendent Choa, and I've told you guys last couple meetings ago, where I feel like, you know, I do, you know, after going to so many after some years, you know, there are so many fantastic things that we see, and that it'd be great to share with other people, whether it's the PTA president who maybe doesn't get to go in and see these different things, or ELAC, or whether it's one of our community partners, or even our city council members. They don't actually get to see all the fantastic work that we get to see. And I feel like this is really great because it's like, oh, let's invite the partners and we all divide up, and I think it's really good and we can spend a little bit more time there. On the flip side, I'll just say that, I mean, I do like this. I do like this, but on the flip side, I also realize that we also are a mixed board where, you know, Trustee Brooks and Trustee Trin, you know, you guys have just come on, and there is some value to when we were all going together to each of the sites and seeing them and talking to them, and just in some ways building sort of connections amongst us as a board, as a governing board. Whether it's different questions that we ask, or when we sit down, I mean, we pick up on different things, and so we function in some ways better as a team. So I feel like there's definitely that. And so like I'm almost like torn now, because I love this. I do love this, and I would love to go ahead and implement this. But I also feel like, you know, is there some middle ground? Because I feel like unless Trustee Trin, Trustee Brooks, or anyone else wants to sort of stay together and go all the time and just see those little like highlights of the schools and not take a deeper dive, I'm just talking out loud here. Sorry. I love this because I feel like I want other people to come in and see all the great things that we're doing, but I also know that there is real value in us being together on those school site visits as one. So
maybe one thing that I was gonna like, I think, yeah, I see that. So I wonder if there's a way, and I don't know like what the criteria would be, but I wonder if there's a way to pick like one day a year, whether it's like the beginning of the year or whatever. We're thinking about, I don't know, part of me is just thinking about like, when we think about our strategic plan and when we think about schools that like we feel like have made, I don't know what the criteria would be. Like Superintendent Ochoa, you would have to like think about what it might look like, but there's schools that are like really have seen significant academic achievement, and like we as a board like go to like they're seeing like close in achievement and equity gaps, and like really seeing improvement on like there's like a specific focus that's tied to the strategic plan. And so we visit like one day where we do collectively as a board, like specifically targeted, but then this plan is what like happens for the rest of the year. I don't know, like some way to think about like getting at that, because I think one of the things that, I mean, I get you. And I also think about like, it's really hard from a scheduling perspective to make it work. Like I couldn't come to like barely anything this year. And I just think about like, you know, if you have a job, right, and you're on the board, like spending half a day, sometimes twice a month, just like isn't doable, right? And so then you think about, and that's been the case for like other board members have had challenges doing that in the past. And then you think about like, then are you not like really part of the board if you can't do that? And like, how does that factor into like inclusivity and barriers to being on a board, right? Like there's a lot there in terms of like the ability to just like spend a lot of time visiting sites, which we all want to do, but it's just not realistic for everybody to do it in the way. And so I think that to some extent like this, I mean, even this can be a lot, right? But taking like an hour, from 3 hours to an hour and a half, from twice a month sometimes to once a month, and sometimes not even every month, like I think eliminate some of those barriers in a way that I think is like really important for the work that we're doing. But I wonder if there's like a more strategic way to get at the point that you're talking about. The other thing I'll just say on this is like, I mean, I love the idea of community partners. I don't know, like if the thought is like all of these partners would come to every one, or we would invite one to each visit. You know, I just would want to make sure, obviously, that we're like being, you know, cognizant of like the impacts that this has on, or, you know, that it has on our sites as we're visiting, and like bringing new folks into the fold, and what are like the ground rules, and you know what I mean? Like just thinking through like all of that and how we kind of share that with our partners. The other thing I think about, and maybe it's like an optional add-on or something like that. I know for a while we were doing like a pre-breakfast or a post, like in the teacher lounge. Like, I think it's nice to have the space be open to more than just administrators when we're there, and particularly if we're bringing in additional folks. Like, it was really nice to sit in a room and have like coffee with, you know, teachers and staff, and just like let them share a little bit about what's going on. You know, we're like entering into their space, and then like not really giving them an opportunity to talk, which like doesn't feel super, I'm sure doesn't feel awesome. And so if there's a way that we can add that into the structure, and again, like whether it's a optional drop-in or a post or whatever, and sometimes that would just depend on like the school schedule, right? Like when the day started, or if folks had like a built-in break or whatever. And not everyone was available necessarily, but at least it's so that would just be the other thing that I would add. And then I think that the last thing is just, I think you mentioned the sanctuary task force, but I do think as we think about our key task forces, thinking about how to integrate them. So think about like the equity task force, inclusion task force, maybe like CDAC, I don't know, like thinking strategically about which ones we could pull into some of the visits as well, I think could be great. And then, yeah, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about like process, like how do we make the kind of like what's the sort of like setting the ground, what are we like asking people to be looking for, if anything, what does like the debrief look like, how do we then like sync up as a board and share like what's like the overarching objective here, and making sure that that's clear, and that then there's a way to like bring some sort of cohesion and sharing if we're like doing it separately, that there's like alignment in terms of goal and process. And then we like come back together probably in this forum to share more about that. So I'd be interested to have that piece as like a follow-up.
I do want to follow up on Ken's point. We're kind of a mixed board. There's some members who've been here for a long time, and then Trustee Brooks and I are newer. And I will say that having the opportunity to be on site at each and every campus was actually really helpful for me to ground myself and to like take it from an abstract like idea of a campus to really like matching it with people. And so that might be something that we maybe think about having almost like an orientation or something like that for sort of as an onboarding mechanism for new board members. And maybe we kind of keep that school visit, just like the shorter visits, on like maybe we take a day or two or something and we set aside time to do that, because I do think it was really helpful to differentiate the different schools that I had not visited before. And then, you know, but at the same time realizing, yes, it does take quite a bit of time to visit every school every year. And so maybe we could do a mix of this and have this kind of be our main thing. And then for new school board members, or maybe just like, I don't know, every other year we set aside a handful of days where it's like a marathon almost. And like, we just like zip all over town. That's just like one idea where it is not as burdensome overall, and it's just like focused.
I had an idea, just so I actually really like I want to try this because I think it's something new and different and all that. The other thing just on top of this is that I think I went to one of the parent meetings with Abbott and realized that as we're bouncing from graduation to graduation and award ceremony to award ceremony, nobody from the board visited Abbott for their graduation, and I think maybe their award ceremony. So I think also on top of okay, so there we go. But I'm thinking on top of this, we also can maybe strategically calendar where people are going to go for the extra events, because I think those are usually in the evenings or afternoons, and so just making sure we're also paying attention to the special events and that we're able to make them. In terms of this visit thing, I wanted to just maybe suggest that we clarify how the visit goes and how is it structured, because one of the things that's very helpful to me when we go to school site visits is Superintendent Ochoa is there and he'll say, hey, take a look at what's happening over here, because maybe I'm not focused on what's happening over here. And he'll explain like, oh, this is part of, this program that we do, and this is why we do this program, and this is what the kids are doing, and all the blah, 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 blah. So I think that whether that's there's like a fly that won't go away, whether that's the principal or the district staff that's assigned to that visit, it would be nice to have just some structure of like, here's our role, we're gonna go in, are we just observing, are we interacting? Because I think sometimes we are a distraction sometimes, and I don't know like exactly what, how we should be. And then this is what you should be looking for, or this is what these students are doing in this corner, and this is why, and this is how it ties back to our strategic plan, and this is where like the money comes from for this program, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And I want to address that point because I think President Watkins, commented on it, and, to an extent, all the remarks have brought up this question of, if we were to do this, how would that visit, what would the structure of the visit be like? And, when the 6 of us are there together visiting a school site, I certainly check in right when we get there with the principal, just, administrator to administrator. But in reality, 3 of you all have done this for 5 years, right? So I'm not really, I don't tell the 3 of you hardly very much. We'll sort of, as visitors, as learners, we're all looking at a certain element of what's in the classroom or the interactions between kids and adults, and a different thing stands out to each one of us. And then when we're in those hallways, that's our time to calibrate, to connect. And then when we get with the principal at the end of the visit, that's a great time to also, debrief on that point. So the way the design looks now in the visual that you have this evening, it shows either David or Diana or myself, because we want to have that district administrator who can set that that discussion point, who can remind about the district strategies, because you all, attend every single board meeting and you're deeply embedded in this work, and our partners are going to be learning a lot. And I think it's going to be, if we were to do this, I think they're going to be like really, really positively affected by it. And then it gives us the opportunity before these visits to say, hey, we're having a Zoom call or a Google Meet. Join us. We're going to talk about the process, how it will all work, and from there the board, the visitation proceeds.
I have a proposal. I feel like we're, again, going back to sort of the mixed and the scheduling, I feel like, this is, well, let me take it back. Over the years, we have done this so many different times, and it seems like we've changed every single year. And sometimes, like President Watkins was saying, we actually met with staff, which was great, either before for breakfast or afterwards for lunch. And we just had a chance to talk to them individually. And some of those were really great, and some of those were really awkward, because it was like, why are you guys here, sort of thing, right? But my point is, like, I feel like this is great, but I almost feel like we need to sort of baby step into it. And so maybe the thought is going back, and maybe we do one a trimester, sort of, and that identifies one day each trimester where we do this, but then the other times we are fall back to our normal sort of school site visits where we, as the five of us, go and still do those different connections and stuff like that. So it's sort of like the middle ground. I don't know if that helps.
As long as you don't call it hybrid, because I don't want to go back to that kind of way. I like that though. I mean, you know, I think that there's an interesting thing there about, you know, being intentional about where we might try this, and then, you know, it'll give us an opportunity to go through the process once and feel our way through it.
Then you can kind of pick the different schools or so based on what President Watkins was talking about, like certain things that we want to highlight for sure. Like when we were at Bowditch and we saw the CCTE, which is the college and career CCE exploration. I mean, that's fantastic. Seeing those kids and talking to them. And I mean, that's something I totally want to highlight. But anyways, this is my thoughts. I don't want to belabor.
Do you have what you need, or?
I have what I need.
Right.
Like all over the place.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, if I were you, I wouldn't, but that's cool.
Hey, I don't know if you all know this, but after the board meetings, I go back and watch the entire board meeting a second time.
Wow.
This one, and well, and also Tatiana takes minutes. So, you know, she's right outside my office. So I kind of hear it a third time and a fourth time. So we have notes. I've got all the notes. This is all being recorded.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You did watch 2 years of our board meeting before you joined as superintendent. So you knew exactly what you were getting into. All right. Moving on to board member statements and requests for future agenda items.
I would like to just make a statement about our recent partnership event that you put on, Mr. Ochoa. It was amazing, and it was my first year attending, and I just thought everything about it was wonderful, and looking forward to building on those partnerships and that event.
One quick comment. Well, no, I'll say that for there. I'll just say, later tonight. Yeah. I feel like sometimes we have good meetings about it. Sometimes, never mind. There's always these dead moments, especially yes. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Focusing. This is our last meeting of our school year before we take our summer, our July off, and then we come back in August. I just want to sort of recap and I said this last time because I know that a lot of our staff and teachers were in professional development. So technically their school year didn't end yet because they were doing PD. But I just, you know, still feeling the effects of COVID and everything. We're coming off of that. Still have some social emotional stuff. We still have a bunch of things. But I mean, when I look back and think about where we've come, and all the hard work that everybody's done, I think it's fantastic. And I think that, you know, Diego, Superintendent Ochoa, and all of your team, all the teachers, all the staff members, everybody, all of our community members, the partners meeting I thought was fantastic, or the luncheon. I mean, it's really great. I know sometimes we're either rushing to the end or can't wait for the end to happen, or sometimes stuff happens at the end. But this is the last meeting. It's a great time to reflect, and I'm just really thankful for everyone's hard work and for the board. I mean, I'm glad that we're here and we're full again, and you know, we've got 2 brand new members, and it's great. And I just want to thank everybody, and sorry, I just get really reflective sometimes. Sorry. It's also late. You know that. Sorry. You'll learn that about me. Yes, I do. And when it gets late, I start going off. But thank you.
Just so it gets late.
And this is what happens. And when it gets late, then we start joking around. But yes, thank you, Diego. Please pass along everybody. I hope everyone enjoys a little bit of a break, and we'll come back in August. So.
I have one request for, and I know it's come up a couple of times tonight, for a middle school specific study session, to really dig into like program and data and et cetera. Like I know it's come up in a variety of different contexts tonight, so I would love for us to think about a place where we can add that in to the calendar. I see some nods, so
Yeah.
I think we're aligned there. All right, future meeting dates are listed. Have a wonderful summer, everybody, especially to all of the, hopefully none of the staff and that teachers are online right now because everyone's on summer, but to some of our district office staff, take some nice time too, please. Come back ready to go in the fall. And with that, I will need a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, trustee Trin for the motion, trustee Brooks for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.